It was a rainy Wednesday evening, and the glow of the restaurant's neon sign shone brightly against the wet pavement outside. The place was known for its upscale ambience, a mix of modern sleekness and cozy charm. Inside, the buzz of conversation and the clinking of glasses filled the air, with waitstaff in crisp uniforms moving swiftly through the dining area. It was just another typical night for Michael, a waiter who had been working here for the past year, trying to make ends meet. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? But tonight, something was different. As Michael hustled past tables, taking orders, clearing plates, and checking in on guests, he noticed a man seated at a table for one in the back corner. He didn't think much of it at first. Another solo diner, likely a businessman or someone on a quick dinner break. The man had an air of casual confidence about him, but nothing that screamed famous. Then, he saw the server bring out a plate of food to the man, a perfectly executed dish of seared salmon with a delicate garnish of microgreens, but with an odd request on the side. A glass of tap water, no ice, and a side of ketchup. Michael couldn't help himself. The moment was just too strange, too amusing. The man, clearly someone important, though Michael couldn't put his finger on why, had ordered a dish that was anything but pretentious. It was the type of meal you'd expect from a tired office worker, not a high-profile guest. Michael couldn't resist the urge to joke. "Oh, ketchup with salmon, huh?" Michael muttered under his breath, shaking his head in disbelief as he walked by. "That's a first." The man glanced up, an almost imperceptible smirk playing at the corners of his lips. But Michael didn't think much of it. The man was probably used to getting such treatment. He was just another rich guy out of touch with the real world, right? And who could blame Michael for thinking so? He had seen enough celebrities and wealthy patrons in his time to grow a thick skin, especially when it came to their quirks. But the real surprise came when Michael returned to the kitchen after delivering the order. He was half joking to the other waiters about the man's odd order when one of the chefs, a tall guy with tattoos all over his arms, stopped him mid-sentence. "That was Elon Musk," he said, his voice low and surprised. Michael blinked, caught off guard. "What? No way. Are you serious?" "Yeah, man," the chef nodded. "He owns this place. Didn't you see the name on the contract? Musk Enterprises, dude." Michael's stomach dropped. Elon Musk. Of course, he had heard the name before, but never in a context where he would expect to see him sitting in his own restaurant, unnoticed by the staff. Sure, he knew the man was a billionaire, the mind behind Tesla and SpaceX, but to see him here, in this unassuming restaurant, ordering a plain glass of water and ketchup, the pieces slowly started falling into place. The casual demeanor, the lack of bodyguards or any pomp and circumstance. Elon Musk had just sat there, casually mocking the world's expectation of him. And here Michael was, mocking him. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? But Michael, still processing the moment, didn't realize the consequences of what he'd done yet. He wasn't worried. What were the chances this man, this legend, would even care about some waiter's offhand remark? Michael had been working at Cafe Renaissance for a year now, ever since he moved to the city with little more than a backpack and a handful of dreams. The job wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, barely. Between his shifts at the restaurant and odd hours doing freelance work, he scraped by. He didn't have much of a support system. Growing up in a small town, Michael had been used to the idea of doing things on his own. His father was a truck driver, always on the road, while his mother worked as a nurse, often picking up extra shifts to make ends meet. They were good people, but their life had never been easy, and Michael never wanted that for himself. That desire for a better life had driven him to the city, to chase after something that would make him feel like he mattered. But the reality was much harsher than he expected. Michael wasn't a big fan of the hustle and bustle lifestyle. Sure, it was exciting at first, and the idea of meeting important people from all walks of life sounded thrilling. But after months of working long hours and serving guests who barely glanced at him, he'd grown disillusioned. The rich, especially, seemed like a different breed. Their attitudes, the way they moved through the world like they owned it, It made Michael feel small. They didn't see him. Not really. He was just another face in a crowd of servers and bartenders, an invisible cog in the machine. And so, over time, Michael developed a sharp edge, a little sarcasm that he used to protect himself from the bitterness he felt inside. If he made fun of them first, they couldn't make fun of him. And that's how it had always been for him. When the wealthy patrons at Café Renaissance ordered something ridiculous or pretentious, Michael would make a snide remark. Sometimes, he didn't even care if they heard. After all, what did it matter? It wasn't like any of them would ever remember his name, let alone care about his thoughts. But tonight? Tonight was different. The man with the ketchup and the salmon? That was Elon Musk. As Michael moved from table to table, clearing plates and checking in on his other guests, he couldn't stop thinking about the situation. Sure, he had no idea what to expect from someone like Elon Musk. He was, after all, an entrepreneur who revolutionized two industries. But Michael couldn't help but feel a little humiliated. That moment of mockery had been a mistake, one he wasn't sure he could undo. Later that evening, when Michael was cleaning off the bar, he overheard a conversation between two of the other waiters. "Hey, you heard," one of them said, barely looking up from his phone. "Musk's been here for a few hours. The guy's real down to earth, you know? Doesn't even act like he's got billions in the bank." "Yeah, but don't get too comfortable," the other waiter warned. "He's not exactly one of us. You never know when he's just testing you, seeing how you'd react. The whole 'I'm just a regular guy' thing? It's all part of the act." Michael frowned at that. He had heard the rumors about Elon Musk before. The way he would occasionally show up at his own restaurants, at his own companies, dressed in a hoodie and jeans, blending in with everyone else. But to see it firsthand, it felt surreal. As the evening wound down, Michael found himself with a rare moment of quiet in between shifts. He leaned against the wall in the staff room, staring out the window at the rain falling softly onto the streets below. His thoughts kept circling back to the moment he mocked Musk's order. Was he really so arrogant? So quick to judge someone he didn't even know? And then, there was the nagging feeling that he'd missed something important. There had to be more to this story than just another rich guy buying a restaurant. Elon Musk didn't become who he was by accident, right? Michael's internal dialogue was cut short when one of the senior waiters, Janet, entered the staff room. Her expression was serious as she pulled him aside. "Michael," she said in a low voice, "I need to talk to you about something. You remember that guy in the back corner tonight? The one with the ketchup and salmon?" "Yeah," Michael said, wincing as he remembered the moment. "Why?" "That wasn't just some regular customer," Janet said, her tone sharp. "You've got no idea who you were talking to, do you?" Michael raised an eyebrow, unsure where this conversation was going. Janet glanced around the room to make sure no one else was listening before leaning in closer. "That was Elon Musk, the owner of the place. And you made fun of his order." Michael froze, the weight of her words settling in. His face turned red, and his stomach lurched. He could barely bring himself to respond, a quiet murmur escaping his lips. "No way." "Way," Janet replied with a half-shrug. "Look, he comes in here sometimes, lays low. No one usually recognizes him, but you're not the first one to slip up. Just don't mess this up, okay?" Michael stood there, feeling the full force of the situation hit him. His head was spinning. Elon Musk, the guy he had mocked for something as trivial as ordering ketchup with his salmon. That guy owned the place. How could he have been so careless? His first instinct was to justify his actions, to tell himself that Musk was just another rich guy who could take a little teasing. But deep down, he knew better. And now, there was only one question left to answer. How would he face the consequences of his mistake? Elon Musk was not the type of man to blend in. At least, not in the way most people would imagine. Sure, he was known for wearing hoodies and sneakers, often looking more like a Silicon Valley techie than a billionaire mogul, but there was something undeniably commanding about him. You could never mistake him for just another rich guy. When Michael realized who he'd mocked that night, he couldn't stop replaying the moment in his head. The man who had ordered ketchup with his salmon, who had sat so casually in the back corner of the restaurant, had been Elon Musk, the man whose innovations had changed the world. The CEO of Tesla and SpaceX, someone who seemed to live in a different stratosphere of existence. And here he was, sitting at Café Renaissance, ordering a simple meal and making himself as invisible as any regular guest. But as Michael paced the kitchen that night, stewing over his mistake, something began to nag at him. He had made fun of Musk for his humble order. But wasn't that part of the reason Musk had made it to the top? He had never bought into the idea that wealth should dictate how you live. Maybe that was why he was able to see things others couldn't, to push forward with ideas that seemed impossible to the rest of the world. Michael couldn't help but feel a little ashamed. The next morning, Michael's shift started like any other. He showed up early, clocked in, and pulled on his uniform, trying to shake the unease that had settled over him since the night before. His mind kept drifting back to that one fateful moment when he'd mocked Musk. It wasn't just that he had made fun of the man. It was that he had completely failed to see him for who he really was. Elon Musk, the visionary, the creator, the man whose name was known across the globe. The thought made Michael cringe. But when he walked through the staff door and into the dining area, he froze. There, sitting at the same corner booth where he'd seen him the night before, was Elon Musk. This time, the man wasn't in a hoodie. He was dressed in a tailored suit, crisp and polished, and his presence seemed even more commanding in the daylight. The moment Michael laid eyes on him, he felt a tight knot form in his stomach. He couldn't just walk up to the man, not after what had happened, but as he stood frozen by the kitchen door, he saw Elon glance over his shoulder, looking for someone, anyone, who could help him. The entire restaurant was bustling, but it felt like time had stopped, like everything in the room was suddenly muted except for the fact that Elon was now staring directly at him. Michael's heart raced, his mind swirling with the dread of what he had done. He could feel the weight of the mistake pressing down on him. He wanted to turn away, to pretend like he hadn't seen the man, but he knew there was no escaping this. Not anymore. Taking a deep breath, Michael walked over to the table. He moved slower than usual, almost as if his feet were made of lead. But when he reached the table, he stood up straight, put on a forced smile, and tried to mask the nervousness in his voice. "Good morning, sir. Can I get you anything else today?" he asked, his voice almost too polite. Elon didn't immediately respond. He simply looked up at Michael with that same quiet intensity, as if studying him. For a moment, Michael could feel his own pulse pounding in his ears. What was he going to say? How was he going to explain himself? Then, Elon spoke. "You know," he said, his voice calm but with an edge of amusement, "I've been thinking about what you said last night." Michael's face flushed. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean." Elon waved his hand, cutting him off. "No need to apologize. I get it. You think it's strange to mix ketchup with salmon, right?" Michael nodded quickly, still feeling the sting of his own actions. "Here's the thing," Elon continued, leaning back in his seat slightly. "People always assume that just because you're successful, you have to follow certain rules or act a certain way. But the truth is, I've always thought that a little bit of rebellion is important, especially when it comes to the small things. It keeps you grounded." Michael's head spun. Rebellion? Grounded? Elon smiled, a genuine, almost paternal expression on his face. "You see, the reason I ordered ketchup with my salmon is because I don't care if it's normal. It's just food. Why shouldn't I enjoy it however I want to?" The words hit Michael like a ton of bricks. Here he was, trying to hold on to his own bitterness and judgments, while Elon Musk, of all people, was telling him to embrace individuality. Michael hadn't even realized he was doing it, judging others, assuming things based on surface-level appearances. Elon studied him for a moment, his gaze sharp yet thoughtful. "I've learned over the years that you shouldn't be afraid to challenge expectations. It's how things get done, how you push boundaries. It's why I've been able to build what I have." Michael felt his stomach churn as he processed the weight of Elon's words. This man didn't just challenge expectations in business, but in life itself. I didn't mean to disrespect you, Mr. Musk. I was just..." Michael trailed off, struggling to find the right words. "I was just being an idiot." Elon leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing with a mixture of amusement and understanding. "Everyone makes mistakes, Michael. It's how you handle them that counts." Michael stood there, completely at a loss. For all the years he had worked in this restaurant, for all the moments where he had made snap judgments about people, he had never once imagined that someone like Elon Musk would teach him this kind of lesson. He had thought the rich were just rich, that they were out of touch with the real world. But now, standing here in front of Elon, Michael realized he had it all wrong. Maybe, just maybe, there was more to this man than he had ever understood. As Michael turned to leave, Elon's voice stopped him once more. "Don't worry about the ketchup," Elon said with a wry smile. "It's just food, and life's too short to worry about what people think of you." Michael nodded, still trying to process everything. But one thing was clear. His life was about to change. The question now was how he was going to respond to this moment of unexpected wisdom. The rest of the day passed in a blur for Michael. He went through the motions, taking orders, clearing plates, making small talk with guests, but his mind kept drifting back to that conversation with Elon Musk. The man's words replayed in his head like a mantra. "It's how you handle your mistakes that counts." It was a lesson that Michael had never expected to learn from someone like Elon Musk. He had always assumed the man was untouchable, someone who lived in a world so far removed from his own that they had nothing in common. But now, in the quiet aftermath of that exchange, Michael was starting to realize how wrong he had been. When his shift ended, Michael's mind was still racing. He threw on his jacket and headed out the back door of the restaurant, stepping into the cool night air. The streets were quieter now, the sounds of the city muffled by the weight of his thoughts. As he walked, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted in him. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he wasn't just getting by, he was learning. He didn't know where this would lead, but for once, he felt like he was on the edge of something bigger than himself. But even as he contemplated this newfound perspective, Michael couldn't deny the nagging feeling that there were still consequences to face. It wasn't just that he had mocked Elon Musk's order. It was that he had mocked someone who owned the very place where he worked. As he neared his apartment, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out and saw that he had a message from Janet, the senior waitress who had warned him about Musk. "Hey Michael, just wanted to let you know that Elon's leaving a big tip for you tonight. He says it's for learning a good lesson. Also, he asked for you to come in early tomorrow. He wants to have a quick chat." Michael's heart skipped a beat. A chat with Elon Musk? He stared at the screen for a moment, trying to process what it meant. What did Elon want to talk about? And why him? The next day, Michael showed up at Café Renaissance earlier than usual. His stomach was a knot of nerves, and he couldn't help but feel like he was walking into some kind of interview. Was this his chance to make a good impression? Or was it the beginning of a consequence for his earlier behavior? He walked into the staff room, where Janet was already busy preparing for the day. She gave him a nod but didn't say much. There was a quiet energy in the room, as if everyone knew something was about to happen, but no one was quite sure what. After what felt like an eternity, the door to the back office opened, and out stepped Elon Musk. He was dressed casually again, jeans, a hoodie, and sneakers, but there was something different about him today. Maybe it was the way he carried himself, or the fact that he was standing in the restaurant he owned, talking to a waiter like Michael. "Michael," Elon said with a smile, extending his hand, "thanks for coming in early. I wanted to chat for a bit." Michael swallowed hard. "Of course, Mr. Musk. What can I do for you?" Elon gestured for Michael to follow him, and they both walked toward the quiet corner of the restaurant where Elon had sat the night before. There were no other guests around yet, so it felt like a strange kind of private meeting. When they sat down, Michael still wasn't sure what to say. His nerves were getting the best of him, but Elon seemed completely at ease, as though he had all the time in the world. "I wanted to start by saying thank you," Elon said, looking Michael directly in the eyes, "for being honest with me yesterday. I think a lot of people, when they realize who I am, they try to overcompensate. They become extra polite, over the top, maybe even fake. But you, Michael, you didn't. You just treated me like a regular guy. I respect that." Michael blinked, surprised by the compliment. Thanks, Mr. Musk. But I wasn't exactly treating you well, was I? I made a joke about your order, and I really shouldn't have." Elon shook his head. "We all make mistakes. I've made plenty. The important part is what you do next. Do you learn from it? Do you take responsibility for it?" He paused, letting the words sink in. I think you're on the right path. Michael felt a wave of relief wash over him. Maybe this wasn't going to be some kind of reprimand after all. Elon leaned forward slightly, his eyes thoughtful. You know, I didn't get to where I am by following the crowd. I got here by questioning things, by being willing to look at situations from a different perspective. A lot of people think they need to have it all figured out, but that's not how it works. It's okay to not know everything. It's okay to mess up. What matters is what you do afterward. Michael felt his chest tighten. The weight of Elon's words was hitting him harder than he expected. Here was a man who had built companies that were changing the world, who had built rockets to take people to Mars, and yet he was telling him, a simple waiter, that it was okay to make mistakes. You don't have to be perfect to be successful, Elon continued, but you do need to keep moving forward. You need to keep learning. Michael sat there, absorbing everything. He realized that this moment wasn't just about apologizing for a silly joke he had made. It was about understanding that success, in business and in life, came from resilience and growth, not perfection. I've been thinking, Elon said after a beat, about giving you a little more responsibility around here. I know you don't see it now, but you've got a lot of potential. You've got that drive in you. You just need a little direction. Michael's head spun. Responsibility? Me? Think about it, Elon said, standing up. Let's talk tomorrow. I have a few ideas. And Michael, just remember, the real value in life isn't in being perfect. It's in learning, growing, and challenging yourself. As Elon walked away, Michael sat there, stunned. His whole world had just shifted. The question now was, what was he going to do with this new chance? Michael barely slept that night. His mind was still buzzing with the conversation he had with Elon Musk. The more he thought about it, the more surreal it felt. Here he was, just a regular guy, working as a waiter at a mid-tier restaurant, and Elon Musk, yes, that Elon Musk, was offering him a chance at something more. But what did it mean? Elon had mentioned potential, drive, and responsibility. The words were still echoing in Michael's head as he pulled on his uniform and made his way to Café Renaissance the next morning. Was this a real opportunity, or just a gesture from a billionaire who liked to make people feel special? Michael wasn't sure. But there was no denying the gravity of what had happened. He was determined to find out. When he arrived, Janet was already there, bustling around the restaurant in preparation for the lunch rush. She noticed Michael as soon as he walked through the door, giving him a quick nod. Hey, Michael, Janet said, her tone a little too casual. I heard you had a little chat with Mr. Musk yesterday. How'd it go? Michael hesitated, unsure how much he should share. He didn't want to come off as too proud or boastful, but he couldn't keep this to himself either. It went well, Michael said carefully. He wants to talk again today, about giving me more responsibility. Janet's eyebrows shot up in surprise. Really? Wow, that's big. Don't screw it up. Michael chuckled nervously. I don't plan to. The rest of the day felt like it dragged on. The regular lunch crowd came and went, and Michael found himself in autopilot mode, taking orders, delivering food, making small talk with the patrons. But in the back of his mind, all he could think about was his meeting with Elon later. Was he ready for whatever opportunity Elon might present? Was he capable of stepping up? Finally, the lunch rush slowed, and Michael saw Elon step into the restaurant. He was dressed casually again. Jeans, a plain t-shirt, and sneakers. But there was an unmistakable air about him. Even without the expensive suits and polished image, Elon Musk commanded attention. He didn't sit in the usual VIP section. Instead, he walked toward Michael with that same relaxed confidence. Ready to talk? Elon asked with a smile. Michael nodded, his heart beating faster. Yeah, of course. Elon motioned for him to follow as he walked toward the back office. The two of them made their way through the kitchen, where Michael could hear the sounds of chefs shouting orders and the sizzling of hot pans. It felt surreal to be walking alongside the man whose name was synonymous with innovation and success. Once they were settled in the back office, Elon wasted no time getting to the point. I've been thinking about you, Michael, Elon began, sitting down behind the desk and folding his hands together. You've got a lot of potential, a lot of drive, but I'm not sure you know what to do with it yet. Michael swallowed, unsure of how to respond. I'm just a waiter, Mr. Musk. Elon smiled, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. Exactly. But that's the thing. The skills you need to succeed aren't tied to the job you're in right now. It's about your mindset, your attitude toward challenges. It's about your ability to grow. Michael shifted in his seat. I don't know. I mean, I've always just kind of gotten by, you know? But I don't know if I'm cut out for something bigger. Elon leaned forward, his gaze direct. That's exactly the kind of thinking I want to change. You think you're just getting by, but you're not. You're learning. You're picking up the skills that others overlook. You just need to recognize it. Michael let that sink in. Was it possible? Could he really change the course of his life from a waiter in a restaurant to something more? I'm offering you a chance to be more than just a waiter here, Elon continued. I want you to manage a few of the day-to-day operations in the restaurant. Oversee the team, handle some of the business side of things, help me improve the overall experience here. Michael blinked. Wait, me? You want me to manage? Elon nodded, his expression serious. Yes. I've watched how you interact with customers, how you handle pressure, how you keep the restaurant running smoothly. You have the right mindset. You just need to take it to the next level. Michael was speechless. The idea of managing anything, let alone a restaurant, felt overwhelming. But at the same time, a spark of excitement started to grow inside him. This was the opportunity he had been waiting for, the one he had never even dared to dream about. Do you want to take the next step, Michael? Elon asked, his eyes intense. Do you want to build something bigger than what you've been doing? Michael thought about it for a moment. He thought about all the late nights he had spent wondering if there was more to life than just serving food and cleaning tables. He thought about his childhood, his parents who had worked tirelessly but had never reached a place of real comfort. He thought about all the people who had told him he was too ordinary, too average, to ever amount to anything more. And then he thought about what Elon had said. The real value in life isn't in being perfect. It's in learning, growing, and challenging yourself. Yes, Michael said, his voice steady now. I'm ready. Elon's smile widened, a look of approval crossing his face. Good. Because this is just the beginning. You'll have to put in the work, but I believe you can do it. Let's see what you're made of. As Michael walked out of the office, his heart was pounding. He had just been given an opportunity that most people could only dream of, and now, everything depended on what he did with it. There was no turning back now. The life he had known, the one where he simply got by, was over. It was time to step up. As he made his way back to the floor, he could already feel the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. But this time, it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a challenge he was finally ready to meet. The next few days at Café Renaissance felt like a whirlwind. Michael's mind raced as he tried to process everything that had happened. One minute, he was just another waiter in a bustling restaurant. The next, he was stepping into a role that had previously seemed far out of his reach. The idea of managing a restaurant, of overseeing the day-to-day operations, seemed both exciting and terrifying. Elon had told him that he had the right mindset, but now it was up to Michael to prove it. The first task was simple: familiarize himself with the schedule and inventory. The small, daily operations that had always been in the background now became his responsibility. Every time Michael walked through the kitchen or took an order from a customer, his mind was working overtime, trying to identify problems and find solutions before they even arose. That afternoon, as Michael walked through the restaurant, he noticed a small issue that no one had pointed out. One of the regular patrons had been waiting for her drink for longer than usual. The kitchen was busy, and the servers were hustling to keep up with the lunch rush, but Michael could tell the drink had slipped through the cracks. He walked over to the table, offering a quick apology. "I'm so sorry for the delay, Mrs. Harris. Let me get that drink for you right away." The woman smiled warmly, reassuring him that it was no big deal, but Michael could see the slight impatience in her eyes. He moved quickly to the bar, where he knew he could find the drink she had ordered. As he waited for the bartender to prepare it, he replayed the moment in his mind. Little details like this matter. It was the kind of thing that, when missed, could snowball into bigger problems. One customer feeling neglected might lead to a review, and a bad review could lead to a dip in business. When he brought the drink to Mrs. Harris, she thanked him, and he noticed the tension in her shoulders relax. Michael realized then that managing the restaurant wasn't just about handling the big issues. It was about noticing the small things, the tiny moments that made a customer's experience better. And those moments had to be managed, constantly and consistently. Later that evening, as Michael was overseeing a shift change, Janet approached him, looking concerned. "You've been doing a great job, Michael," she said, her voice low so no one else could hear. "But you need to watch out for the others. They've been talking." Michael raised an eyebrow. "Talking about what?" "About you stepping into this role. Some of the other servers aren't sure how they feel about you getting all this responsibility so quickly," Janet said. "They think you might be overstepping." Michael felt a pang of anxiety. "What should I do?" Janet shrugged. "Don't let it get to you. But you need to prove you're capable. You're already making a good impression on the bosses, but you've got to show the team that you can handle the pressure, too." Michael nodded. "I'll do my best." The tension among the staff was palpable. Every decision he made felt under a microscope. Michael quickly learned that being in charge wasn't just about organizing shifts or taking inventory. It was about managing relationships. As much as the guests were important, so were the people who worked alongside him. A few days later, as Michael was stepping into the office to check in on some paperwork, Janet pulled him aside again. "Hey," she began, her voice cautious. "I've been thinking. You've been doing great, but there's something I want to talk to you about." Michael felt a jolt of nervousness. "What's up?" "There's been some grumbling from the kitchen staff. They're a little upset with how things have been handled recently. You've been trying to make improvements, but you've got to remember that they've been here a lot longer than you," Janet said. "They're used to doing things their way, and they don't like change." Michael frowned. "I didn't mean to step on anyone's toes. I'm just trying to make sure everything runs smoothly." "I know," Janet said, giving him a sympathetic look. "But it's not just about being right. It's about making sure people are on your side. You've got to build trust with them." Michael took a deep breath, absorbing the advice. He realized that his focus had been entirely on the logistics of running the restaurant, but he hadn't considered how his decisions were affecting the people who worked with him. "Thanks, Janet. I'll talk to them." Later that week, Michael called a meeting with the kitchen staff. He had learned a lot in a short amount of time, but he also understood that there was still a lot he had to learn. As he walked into the kitchen, he could feel the eyes of the cooks on him, the weight of their silent judgment. This wasn't going to be easy, but he was determined to make it work. "Hey, guys," Michael began, trying to keep his voice steady. "I know I've made a lot of changes around here, and I'm not always sure if they've been the right ones. I wanted to hear from you about how things have been going. I'm here to help, not to make things harder." There was a long pause before one of the cooks, Marco, spoke up. "We've been here a lot longer than you, man. We know how to run things. We don't need someone coming in and changing everything just because they think they know better." Michael nodded, understanding the frustration. "I get it. I really do. And I'm not trying to take over. But I think we all want the same thing, right? A restaurant that runs smoothly, a place where we all can feel proud of what we're doing." Another cook, Linda, chimed in. "It's not just about the smooth running, though. You've been pushing us hard, and we're not always on the same page. It's hard to make quick changes when we're not involved in the process." Michael sighed, realizing the truth in her words. "You're right. I've been focused on the bigger picture, but I need to be more in touch with the people who are actually doing the work. From now on, I'll make sure to keep everyone in the loop before making any big changes." Marco gave a small nod. "That's all we want. Communication." Michael felt a sense of relief wash over him. The meeting had gone better than he expected. The cooks were still skeptical, but they were willing to listen. And for now, that was all he could ask for. As the weeks went by, Michael found his footing. The restaurant was running smoother, the team was starting to gel, and he had earned the respect of the kitchen staff and the servers. There were still challenges, of course, but Michael was learning to balance the needs of the business with the needs of the people he worked with. One day, as he was reviewing the week's sales and inventory, he got a text from Elon. "How are things going?" "I hear good things." Michael smiled as he typed back. "Things are going well. A lot to learn, but I'm getting the hang of it." Elon's reply was simple. "You're doing great. Keep it up." That was all Michael needed. The validation he had been looking for. He knew there was still a long way to go, But he was no longer the guy just getting by. He was the one making things happen. And as he looked around Café Renaissance, his restaurant now, Michael knew that this was only the beginning. It had been a few weeks since Michael had officially stepped into the management role at Café Renaissance. He had faced plenty of small hurdles, miscommunications, difficult customers, and the pressure of overseeing a team that had been skeptical of him at first. But now, things were starting to feel more natural. The restaurant was running smoother, and Michael was starting to build real confidence in his decisions. But just as he thought he had a handle on things, a challenge came in the form of a massive catering order. It was a Monday morning when the email came through. Michael was sitting in the back office, sipping his coffee and going over the week's schedule, when he saw the subject line, "Urgent Catering Order, 150 guests." His eyes widened. The email detailed a last-minute catering request for an upscale corporate event. The event was scheduled for Thursday, and they needed the entire menu delivered and set up at an off-site venue. It was a huge order, one that would require the entire kitchen staff, several waitstaff members, and a careful logistical plan. Michael stared at the screen, the weight of the task beginning to settle on his shoulders. He was used to handling smaller events, but this was a big deal. He picked up his phone and dialed Elon's number. It only rang once before Elon answered. "Michael, what's up? I just got an email about a massive catering order. It's for 150 guests, and it's on Thursday. We've never done anything like this before." "I'm a little nervous about it," Michael said, his voice filled with uncertainty. Elon was silent for a moment, and Michael couldn't tell if that was a good or bad sign. Then Elon spoke, his voice calm. "Don't worry, Michael. You've got this. But you need to plan carefully. Make sure you've got all your bases covered, and don't hesitate to delegate where needed. It's all about making sure the team is on board." Michael exhaled. Elon's reassurance helped, but he knew it wouldn't be easy. "Thanks, Mr. Musk. I'll make sure we're ready." The first thing Michael did was call a team meeting with the kitchen and waitstaff to go over the details. When they gathered in the back room, he could see the uncertainty in the eyes of the kitchen staff. They weren't used to this type of order, and many of them were concerned about being able to handle the volume without compromising the quality of the food. "We're facing a big challenge here, but we're in this together," Michael started, trying to rally the team. "I know we've never done something of this scale, but I believe in you all. We'll break this down into manageable tasks, and we'll support each other." He outlined the plan. The kitchen would handle the prep in the morning, while a small team of servers would be responsible for setting up and ensuring everything was delivered to the venue. The biggest challenge, though, was making sure the food arrived fresh and on time. What if something goes wrong? Marco, one of the senior chefs, asked, his face tense. "We'll have backup plans," Michael said confidently. "I'll be in touch with everyone throughout the day. If anything goes off course, we'll fix it immediately." As he went over the details, Michael couldn't help but feel a rising sense of responsibility. This was the moment he had been preparing for. His first big test as a manager. The days leading up to the event were a whirlwind of preparation. Michael spent hours making phone calls, confirming orders, and double-checking every detail. He coordinated with the delivery company, making sure that everything would be packed properly for transport. He met with the team repeatedly to ensure they were on the same page. By Wednesday afternoon, everything seemed to be coming together. The food was prepped and ready, and the staff was in place. Michael was cautiously optimistic. But just as he thought everything was going according to plan, disaster struck. Late Wednesday evening, Michael received a phone call from the delivery service. There had been an issue with one of their trucks. The vehicle had broken down, and they wouldn't be able to deliver the food to the venue on time. Michael's heart sank as he listened to the problem unfold. The truck wasn't scheduled to be repaired until late in the evening, and by then, it would be too late. The entire event was at risk. He paced the kitchen, trying to think of a solution. "What do I do?" he thought desperately. This was the kind of situation that could ruin everything. The restaurant's reputation, the trust Elon had put in him, and possibly his job. In a moment of clarity, Michael decided to call an audible. He immediately reached out to a few trusted local catering services that he had worked with in the past. After a few tense minutes on the phone, he secured another truck that could pick up the food directly from the restaurant and deliver it to the venue. But there was no time to waste. He quickly rallied the team and got everyone working overtime to repackage the food for transport. The kitchen staff worked tirelessly, prepping trays and making sure everything was packed carefully. The waitstaff began gathering supplies, getting ready for the setup at the venue. The pressure was mounting, but Michael remained calm. He could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on him, but he didn't waver. If anything, he became more focused. This was the moment where he could prove to himself, and to everyone else, that he was capable of leading. By the time the truck arrived at the venue, it was nearly 7 p.m., just an hour before the event was scheduled to start. The team was exhausted, but they had pulled together and done everything they could to ensure the food arrived in time. Michael stood in the back of the restaurant, watching as the last of the trays were loaded onto the truck, his heart racing. As the truck pulled away, Michael felt a surge of pride. They had done it. They had pulled off the impossible. Hours later, Michael stood in the kitchen, the restaurant finally quiet for the night. The catering event had gone off without a hitch. The guests were happy, and the feedback had been overwhelmingly positive. Michael had managed to pull everything together, even when it seemed like it was all falling apart. He sat down at the kitchen table, running his hands through his hair. He was exhausted, but the sense of accomplishment was worth it. This was the moment that would define his role as manager. He had faced a major crisis, and instead of backing down, he had led his team through it. His phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a text from Elon. "Great job today, Michael. I heard everything went perfectly. This is what leadership looks like." Michael smiled. It was the validation he needed. He had passed his first big test. After the catering event, things at Café Renaissance started to feel a little easier for Michael. The successful execution of the massive order had earned him the respect of the staff, and more importantly, his own confidence had taken a huge leap. It wasn't just that he had handled the crisis. It was the way he had managed the pressure, the quick decisions, and most of all, how he had kept the team motivated when everything seemed to be falling apart. The next few days were calm in comparison, allowing Michael to catch his breath. The restaurant was running smoothly, and for the first time, it felt like things were clicking into place. His relationship with the staff had evolved from skepticism to trust. They were starting to see him not just as the guy who was handed the manager role out of nowhere, but as someone who could get things done. It wasn't just the team that had noticed. Word had gotten around about the catering order. A few regular patrons had commented on how professional the service had been that night. Michael even received a few congratulatory emails from clients who had attended the event. One afternoon, while Michael was overseeing a slow lunch shift, Elon texted him. "I'm hearing great things, Michael. Keep up the momentum. Let's chat soon." Michael grinned. That simple message was like fuel for his fire. He had been doing everything he could to prove himself, but it felt like this was the first time Elon was really seeing his efforts. But that sense of accomplishment was quickly tempered by the realization that there was no time to rest on his laurels. Just as he was beginning to feel comfortable in his role, a new challenge arose that tested everything he had learned. The problem started with the restaurant supplier. One of the main distributors of fresh produce and meats had sent a shipment that was subpar, and several high-end ingredients had gone bad. The quality of the food was now at risk. Michael immediately made calls to the supplier, trying to resolve the issue, but they were giving him the runaround. He knew that a delay in resolving this would not only affect the restaurant's reputation, but also leave the kitchen scrambling to improvise. "Michael, this is bad," Janet said as she came into the office, holding a list of the ingredients that had gone bad. "We can't serve half the items on the menu tonight. If we don't find a way to fix this, we'll have to send people away, and that's going to look bad." Michael felt the pressure mounting again. Everything that had been running smoothly for the past few weeks was now at risk. He stared at the list of missing ingredients, running through his mind all the dishes that relied on them. The last thing he wanted was to disappoint customers, especially the ones who had been coming to Café Renaissance for years. He needed a solution, fast. Michael took a deep breath. He knew that he couldn't let the restaurant fall apart over something that was out of his control. He called the supplier one last time, but when they refused to send replacements quickly enough, he made a decision. "Janet, we're going to have to be creative tonight. We're going to alter the menu temporarily, and I need everyone to be on board. We'll take some of our most popular dishes and substitute where we need to, but I don't want any of the guests to feel like they're getting less than what they expect." Janet looked surprised. You want to change the menu in the middle of the day? Exactly, Michael said, his voice firm. We're going to make it work. He immediately gathered the kitchen staff and explained the situation. They were going to work around the missing ingredients, using substitutes that would maintain the quality of the dishes without sacrificing taste. He also made the decision to update the menu online and on the physical menus in the restaurant to reflect the changes. It wasn't ideal, but it was the only way forward. Michael knew that if they handled it with confidence and professionalism, the guests might never even notice. The dinner shift that evening was intense. The restaurant was packed, and the staff was on edge, but Michael's calm and decisive actions had a ripple effect. The kitchen ran like a well-oiled machine, despite the hiccups. The waitstaff adapted to the menu changes quickly, and the guests were none the wiser, enjoying their meals as usual. As the night came to a close, Michael stood by the bar, watching as the last of the diners paid their bills. He felt exhausted, but a sense of pride washed over him. They had done it. Despite the disaster with the supplies, the team had pulled together and made it work. Just then, he received a call from Elon. Michael, I've been hearing great things about tonight. Word got back to me about the supplier issue, and I just wanted to say, well done. Michael smiled, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. Thanks, Elon. It wasn't easy, but we managed. Elon's voice sounded impressed. That's what I like to hear. You handled that like a pro. And don't forget, these moments are what make or break you. You're getting stronger, Michael. Keep this up. Michael couldn't help but feel a surge of confidence. It wasn't just that he had solved the problem. It was the way he had done it. He had stepped up when it mattered most, and that was something he could be proud of. The next few days were quieter, but Michael didn't let his guard down. He was starting to feel like the restaurant's momentum was shifting in the right direction. The team was working better together, and the customers were happy with the quality of service. But Michael knew that there were always new challenges around the corner. As much as he had grown in his role, he couldn't forget the lessons he had learned during the crisis. In a way, those crises were what had shaped him into the leader he was becoming. They had forced him to think on his feet, to make decisions in the face of uncertainty, and to motivate his team when everything felt like it was falling apart. As Michael prepared for another day at the restaurant, he received another text from Elon. Let's catch up soon. I'm looking to push the restaurant to the next level. I think you're ready for it. Michael couldn't help but feel excited. The work he had put in was starting to pay off, and now there was talk of taking things even further. He had come a long way from the nervous waiter who had mocked Elon Musk's order. Now, Michael was the one calling the shots, handling challenges with confidence, and proving that he had what it took to make the restaurant and his career grow. And this was just the beginning. A few weeks had passed since the catering disaster and the supplier mishap, and Café Renaissance had found its rhythm. The restaurant's reputation was stronger than ever, and word was spreading about the impressive service and quality of the food. The team had truly come together, and Michael felt more at ease in his role than he had in the beginning. But just as things seemed to settle into a steady groove, Michael received a text that changed everything. It was from Elon. Michael, I've been thinking about your progress. You've shown leadership, but I think you're ready for something bigger. Let's meet this week. I've got an opportunity for you. Michael's heart skipped a beat. An opportunity? What did that mean? He had been working hard at Café Renaissance, but he couldn't help but wonder if Elon was thinking about something more than just overseeing this one restaurant. The following day, Michael found himself walking into Elon's office, a place he had only ever visited briefly before. The walls were filled with framed pictures of successful ventures and business awards. Elon was standing by the window, looking out over the city skyline, his posture relaxed yet commanding. Michael, good to see you, Elon said, turning with a smile. I've been following your progress closely, and I'm impressed. Michael felt a wave of pride, but also a touch of nervousness. Thank you. I've been doing everything I can to make sure things are running smoothly. Elon nodded. I know, and that's why I want to talk to you about something. You've proven you're ready to lead, not just in this restaurant, but in something bigger. Michael's heart raced. Bigger? Like what? Elon walked over to his desk and slid a folder across the table toward Michael. I'm looking at expanding Café Renaissance. We have opportunities to open new locations across the country. but I need someone to take charge of the entire operation. Someone who understands the heart of this restaurant, the staff, the culture, and can build on it in new cities. Michael stared at the folder in front of him, the weight of Elon's words sinking in. Was he really offering him the chance to manage an entire chain of restaurants? This would be a huge step, Elon continued, his voice steady. It's not just about managing one restaurant anymore. You'd be in charge of overseeing multiple locations, from the hiring of staff to the daily operations. It would require you to travel, to hire new teams, and to ensure each location maintains the same level of excellence we've built here. Michael felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. The thought of expanding was thrilling, Café Renaissance was special, and the idea of sharing it with other cities felt like a dream. But he also knew the scale of the responsibility. I don't know, Michael said, his voice faltering slightly. This is a lot to take on. What if I'm not ready? Elon gave him a knowing look. Michael, you've been ready from the moment you took the reins here. You've proven yourself time and again. This is your chance to take everything you've learned and apply it on a larger scale. Don't let fear hold you back. Michael was silent for a moment, the weight of Elon's words hanging in the air. This was a turning point in his career. Everything he had worked for had led to this moment, and it was up to him to decide if he was going to take the leap. I want to do it, Michael said finally, his voice firm. I'm ready. Elon smiled. I thought you would be. I'll have my team start working on the logistics. You'll need to be involved in every step. It's going to be a lot of work, but I have no doubt you're up for it. Michael felt a rush of adrenaline as he stood up, shaking Elon's hand. He was stepping into a new chapter of his career, one that would test him in ways he couldn't even imagine. But it was also the opportunity he had always dreamed of. The next few weeks were a blur. Michael began to work closely with Elon's team to develop a strategy for the expansion. They started with research into the best cities for a new Café Renaissance location, looking at demographics, local competition, and potential for growth. Michael traveled to different parts of the country, visiting potential cities and scouting out the perfect spots for the new restaurant. Each city had its own challenges, but Michael was determined to find a place where Café Renaissance could thrive. During this time, he continued to oversee the day-to-day operations of the original restaurant, which remained as busy as ever. The transition wasn't easy. He had to divide his time between handling the expansion project and keeping the restaurant running smoothly. But with each new challenge, he grew more confident in his ability to manage both. One morning, as Michael was reviewing the progress of the new restaurant locations, he received a call from Janet. Her voice was a little shaken when she answered the phone. Michael, we've got a problem, Janet said. There's a review online. It's from a couple who came in last night, and they're not happy. They're saying the food wasn't up to par and the service was slow. Michael's heart sank. He had worked so hard to build the restaurant's reputation, and the last thing he wanted was a negative review to tarnish it. I'll take care of it, he said immediately, trying to steady his nerves. Have you talked to the staff? I have, but we're going to need to make it right. The review is already up, and it's getting attention. Michael took a deep breath. He knew that every restaurant had its off nights. What mattered was how they responded. This was his chance to show that Café Renaissance was about more than just good food. It was about a commitment to excellence, no matter the circumstances. Michael called the couple who had written the review. They were frustrated, but Michael listened patiently as they explained their experience. He acknowledged their concerns and apologized sincerely. He offered to refund their meal and invited them to return for a complimentary dinner on the house. It was the right move. The couple agreed to come back, and when they did, they were treated with the utmost care. Michael personally ensured that their meal was perfect and the service was impeccable. By the time they left, their attitude had shifted from frustration to appreciation. A few days later, the couple updated their review, removing the negative comments and praising the restaurant for its response. The incident was a reminder that no matter how successful the restaurant became, it still needed to prioritize customer satisfaction above all else. As Michael continued to juggle his role at Café Renaissance and the expansion project, he learned that every decision he made had a ripple effect. Whether it was responding to a negative review or managing the logistics of opening a new location, Michael understood that leadership meant being involved in every aspect of the business. And as the expansion took shape, Michael began to realize that this opportunity wasn't just about the restaurant's growth. It was about his own personal growth as a leader, a manager, and a business owner. The road ahead was going to be challenging, but Michael was ready for whatever came his way. After all, he had already faced bigger obstacles and come out on top. Now, he had the chance to build something lasting, something that could change the future of Cafe Renaissance, and his own future along with it. The excitement surrounding the restaurant's expansion had been palpable. Michael had spent the last few weeks traveling between cities, narrowing down potential locations, meeting with architects, and solidifying the business plans for the new Cafe Renaissance locations. It was thrilling, but the pressure was starting to build. Elon had placed his faith in him, and with every step forward, Michael could feel the weight of that trust growing heavier. He was no longer just managing one restaurant. He was managing the future of the brand itself. Each decision had the potential to shape the company's trajectory, for better or worse. One evening, as Michael sat at his desk reviewing a stack of expansion paperwork, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Janet. "Michael, we've got an issue at the restaurant. The new chef, Derek, called in sick, and we're understaffed. We're already seeing a slow night, but I think we're going to need some help tonight." Michael rubbed his temples, the familiar weight of responsibility pressing down on him. The restaurant couldn't afford a slow night, especially with all the attention the expansion was garnering. Cafe Renaissance had always been known for its top-notch food and service, and one bad night could affect the reputation they had worked so hard to build. "Janet, I'll be there in 20 minutes, he replied, grabbing his jacket. When Michael arrived at the restaurant, the atmosphere was tense. The dining room was quieter than usual, and the kitchen staff was visibly stretched thin. Derek's sudden absence had left a huge gap, especially with the dinner rush looming. Michael could see the stress on Janet's face as she greeted him at the door. "Michael, we've had to make some adjustments to the menu tonight. The kitchen is scrambling to cover for Derek, and the servers are getting frustrated with the pace. I don't know how we're going to make it through tonight," she explained. Michael looked around at the busy restaurant. The staff was doing their best, but it was clear that they needed direction. "We've got this," Michael said with determination. "Let's divide and conquer. I'll go in and help out in the kitchen, and you keep the front of the house running smoothly." The next few hours were a whirlwind. Michael put on an apron and dove right into the kitchen, where he worked alongside the remaining chefs to help prep dishes and expedite orders. It wasn't glamorous, but he was used to working hard alongside his team. His presence helped the kitchen regain a sense of order, and slowly, the dishes started leaving the kitchen at a steadier pace. Meanwhile, Janet had rallied the waitstaff, making sure everyone remained upbeat despite the tension in the air. Michael could hear her speaking to the team, her voice calm and reassuring, reminding them that the guests would appreciate their efforts. By the time the night ended, the restaurant had weathered the storm. The guests had been understanding, and the staff had pulled together to get through a tough night. As Michael walked through the now-empty restaurant, his mind was still racing. The experience reminded him of how fragile the business could be, how quickly everything could unravel if even one piece of the puzzle was missing. Derek's absence had put the team under immense pressure, and they had come close to buckling. But they had survived. They had pulled together and delivered, and that was what mattered. Janet came over to him as he was heading out the door. "Michael, you did a great job tonight. We wouldn't have gotten through without you." He smiled, exhausted but content. "We're a team, Janet. Everyone did their part." That night, as he sat down at home with a beer in hand, Michael found himself reflecting on everything that had happened over the past few months. The restaurant's growth, the expansion project, and now, the challenges that came with managing such a high-stakes operation. It wasn't easy, but the thrill of building something bigger than himself, something that mattered, kept him going. As exhausted as he was, he knew this was just the beginning. The expansion was happening, and soon, Michael would need to be prepared for the next wave of challenges. The next few weeks were filled with logistical planning, meetings with potential staff for the new locations, and countless decisions about design, branding, and operations. Michael was living and breathing Cafe Renaissance. He had little time for anything else. Every moment was dedicated to ensuring that the new restaurants would be just as successful as the original location. Elon had been increasingly involved in the process, and Michael appreciated his guidance. He had learned so much from him in a short period, not just about business, but about leadership. Elon's ability to see the bigger picture and make bold moves had inspired him to do the same. However, the pressure continued to mount. With the opening of the first new location only weeks away, Michael found himself pulled in multiple directions. The budget for the new restaurant was coming in higher than expected, and there were setbacks with the construction of the space. One evening, Michael found himself at dinner with Elon to discuss the progress of the expansion. "Michael," Elon said, looking at him over the top of his glass, "you're doing a great job, but I need to be honest. The opening of the first location is crucial. We're putting a lot of money into this, and if it doesn't succeed, it could set us back significantly." Michael nodded, his nerves fraying slightly. "I understand, Elon. I won't let it fail." Elon gave him a knowing look. "I believe in you, but it's going to take everything you've got." The following days were an intense blur. Michael worked tirelessly, overseeing every detail of the opening, from finalizing the menu to conducting staff training. He wasn't sleeping much, and even when he did, his mind was racing with a million different thoughts. The weight of the responsibility felt heavier than ever. This wasn't just about making Cafe Renaissance a success anymore. It was about making sure the expansion went off without a hitch. The night before the grand opening of the first new location, Michael stood in the middle of the dining room, looking around. The space was beautiful, just as he had envisioned. It was sleek, modern, and warm, with an atmosphere that felt distinctly Cafe Renaissance. He felt a surge of pride. Tomorrow was a big day. He had everything in place, the staff was ready, and the menu was perfect. He had worked so hard to get to this point, and now it was time to let it all unfold. But there was no denying it. The pressure was on. One mistake, one hiccup, and everything he had worked for could crumble. Michael took a deep breath. This was it, the moment where everything changed. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The day of the grand opening finally arrived. Michael woke up before dawn, the excitement bubbling in his chest despite the nerves that had kept him awake most of the night. The months of planning, the late-night meetings, and the endless rounds of paperwork had all led to this moment. The first Cafe Renaissance expansion location was about to open its doors to the public. As he stood in front of the new restaurant, he couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. The building stood tall and polished, its sleek design a reflection of everything he had envisioned when the expansion had first been proposed. The windows gleamed, the signage was crisp, and the outdoor seating area was perfectly set up to welcome the evening crowd. It looked like a place people would want to gather, to enjoy great food and even better company. Michael checked his watch. The staff would be arriving soon. There was still so much to do before the doors opened. Final touches, briefings, last-minute checks. But he was determined to make everything perfect. Janet arrived first, looking eager and ready. "Everything's in place. The kitchen's prepped, the staff is in uniform, and the reservations are already filling up," she said, flashing Michael a reassuring smile. "That's good to hear," Michael replied, his voice tight with anxiety. He had been working so hard for this moment, but the weight of the expectations was heavy. He wasn't just opening a new restaurant. He was building the future of Cafe Renaissance. It was no longer just about serving a few great meals. This had to be a success, and he had to prove to Elon that he could handle this level of responsibility. The other members of the team started arriving, including the chefs, waitstaff, and managers for the front of the house. They were all excited, but also felt the pressure of the event. This wasn't just any day. It was the day they would define the restaurant's future. Michael gathered everyone for a quick pre-service briefing in the dining room. "All right, everyone, today is the beginning of something huge," he started, looking around at the faces of his team. "This isn't just about running a successful restaurant. This is about setting the standard for every new location we open. We need to show the world what Cafe Renaissance is all about: quality, passion, and teamwork. Let's give our guests an unforgettable experience. We're all in this together." The team nodded, their confidence building under Michael's leadership. They had trained hard for this, and now it was time to execute. As the first wave of customers arrived, Michael found himself pulled in different directions. The reservations were coming in steadily, and there was a buzz in the air as guests filed in, eager to experience the new location. The kitchen staff was hustling to keep up, while the waitstaff worked to make sure every guest was attended to with care. Michael moved through the restaurant, making sure everything was running smoothly. He checked on the kitchen, chatted briefly with the bartenders, and made sure the front-of-house team was staying organized. He was everywhere, doing everything, his focus sharp as ever. But despite the careful preparation, there were moments when things didn't go according to plan. One table had a delay on their order, another complained about the timing of their appetizers, and there was a minor issue with a broken light fixture in the bathroom. Each issue, while manageable, added to the mounting pressure that was building in the back of his mind. Michael did his best to stay calm, resolving each problem with a quick, decisive action. He wasn't about to let anything derail the night. It was a balancing act, juggling immediate crises with the long-term goal of running a seamless operation. As the evening wore on, Michael found himself standing in the back of the restaurant, watching the dining room fill with satisfied customers. The atmosphere was lively, and the energy was contagious. There were moments when he could hear the chatter and laughter, the clink of glasses, and the satisfied hum of diners enjoying their meals. He felt a growing sense of pride. This was it. This was Café Renaissance. The food was coming out on time, the staff was operating like a well-oiled machine, and the guests were happy. Everything that had been planned, every detail that had been carefully crafted, was coming together. But as Michael turned to check on one last thing, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Elon. "Michael, I'm hearing great things about tonight. I'll be there in an hour to see it in person." Michael's stomach dropped. He had been managing the stress of the evening, but knowing Elon was coming made everything feel real. This was the moment where his work would be judged, and he needed to prove that he could handle the responsibility. When Elon arrived, Michael felt a rush of nerves. He greeted him with a firm handshake and a smile, trying to mask the anxiety he was feeling. "Michael, I'm impressed," Elon said, looking around the room. "It's busy, the staff looks sharp, and the energy is exactly what I wanted. I can see your vision in every detail." Michael felt a wave of relief wash over him, but he wasn't done yet. There were still a few hours of service to get through, and he couldn't afford to relax now. Elon looked around once more, his eyes scanning the room. "How do you feel about everything so far?" Michael paused, then responded. "It's going well, but there's always room for improvement. We've had a couple of hiccups, but nothing we can't handle." Elon nodded. "I agree. Every new venture has its challenges, but I'm confident you're more than capable of handling them. You've done great so far, Michael." As the night drew to a close and the last guests left, Michael let out a deep sigh of relief. The restaurant had done well, better than he had expected. The service had been mostly smooth, the food was received well, and most importantly, the guests had left happy. The team celebrated with high fives and congratulations as they wrapped up for the night. Michael lingered for a moment, surveying the now empty dining room. It felt surreal. He had done it. Café Renaissance was officially open in its new location, and it had been a success. Later that night, as Michael sat in his office, a final message from Elon appeared on his phone. "Congratulations, Michael. You've done it. You've set the standard for everything to come. I'm proud of you." Michael smiled to himself, feeling the weight of the moment. It wasn't just about the grand opening. It was about everything that had led up to it. All the late nights, the tough decisions, the moments of doubt. It had all led to this. But as he sat there, he also knew that this was just the beginning. The first location was a success, but now the real work began. There would be more locations to open, more challenges to face, and more opportunities to prove himself. But for now, Michael allowed himself a moment of pride. He had done it. The buzz from the grand opening of Café Renaissance's first expansion location still lingered in the air. Michael had managed to accomplish what he set out to do. He had successfully opened a new restaurant, the service was solid, and the food received rave reviews. Elon had been pleased, and for a brief moment, it felt like the weight of the world had been lifted off his shoulders. But Michael knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The honeymoon phase of the expansion was over, and now it was time to get down to the hard work of replicating this success in other cities. In the weeks following the opening, The restaurant continued to operate smoothly. Customers flocked to the new location, and the positive reviews continued to pour in. Michael was riding a wave of success, but in the back of his mind, he couldn't shake the growing realization that his role was about to change again. The next location was already in the works, and soon, Michael would be overseeing multiple restaurants across the country. He had to ensure the success of each one, but the pressure of managing the logistics, the people, and the systems involved was starting to take its toll. One afternoon, while Michael was deep in thought reviewing the next location's plans, his phone rang. It was Janet. "Hey, Michael," Janet said, her voice sounding tense. "We've got a problem. The second location's construction is behind schedule. The contractors are telling us they'll need another 2 weeks, but we don't have that kind of time. We're supposed to open in 3 weeks. What do you want to do?" Michael felt a familiar tightness in his chest. Time was running out, and this was a huge obstacle. He had worked so hard to get to this point, and now everything was in danger of being delayed. "Okay, let me think for a second," Michael said, pacing as he tried to come up with a solution. "Can we get a second team in there? Maybe we can find a way to speed up the process without sacrificing quality. I'll call the contractor and see if we can negotiate some overtime. Let's figure out what it's going to take to get this done." Michael's mind raced as he formulated a plan. The team would need to work quickly and efficiently, but there was no room for mistakes. This was the kind of challenge he had prepared for, but it didn't make the pressure any easier to bear. "I'll get in touch with the contractors now," he added, "and let's get a backup plan in place just in case." Over the next few days, Michael found himself on the phone with contractors, designers, and suppliers, pushing for faster timelines and creative solutions to speed up the build-out. It felt like every time he solved one problem, another one emerged. He was burning the candle at both ends, trying to keep up with the ever-growing list of responsibilities. But despite the chaos, Michael remained focused. He knew that setbacks were inevitable, but it was how he handled them that would make the difference. A few days later, as Michael was finalizing some last-minute details for the upcoming opening, he received a call from Elon. "Michael," Elon said, his voice calm but serious, "I've been looking at the progress on the expansion, and I think we need to talk." Michael's stomach tightened. He had heard Elon's voice many times before, but there was something about the tone that made his nerves spike. "Sure, Elon. What's on your mind?" Michael replied, trying to sound confident despite the growing anxiety. "I've been thinking about the future of Cafe Renaissance, and we need to talk about our next moves," Elon said. "I want you to lead the next phase of the expansion, but I need to know you're ready. We're scaling up quickly, and I want someone who can think ahead, who can handle the pressure and the complexities of running multiple locations." Michael took a deep breath. This was the kind of responsibility he had wanted. This was what he had been working toward. But the truth was, he wasn't sure if he was truly ready for the next phase. There was so much on his plate already, and the thought of managing multiple locations at once was daunting. "I'm ready, Elon," Michael said, trying to push his self-doubt aside. "I'll make it work." Elon seemed pleased. "Good. I know you'll do great. But just know that as we grow, the challenges are going to become bigger. The stakes are higher, and the pressure is unrelenting. Are you ready for that?" Michael paused, letting the weight of Elon's words settle over him. "I am," he said finally. "I'm ready for whatever comes next." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Michael was on the phone with suppliers, contractors, and restaurant managers almost constantly. He was flying back and forth between locations, ensuring everything was falling into place for the next opening. The second restaurant would need to be perfect, no room for error. Every time he thought he had everything under control, another issue would pop up. Staffing problems, scheduling conflicts, supply shortages. Each new hurdle tested his resolve. And with each passing day, the pressure seemed to grow. One night, after a long day of meetings and site visits, Michael returned to his hotel room and collapsed onto the bed. He hadn't had a full night's sleep in weeks, and the exhaustion was starting to take its toll. His mind was racing. There was so much to think about, so many things he still needed to do. As he stared at the ceiling, Michael realized something. He had spent so much time focusing on what was next, on the expansion and the growth of the brand, that he had lost sight of what really mattered. He had gotten so caught up in the logistics and the pressure that he hadn't taken a moment to appreciate how far he had come. I need to slow down, he thought. I can't keep going at this pace forever. The next day, after another grueling round of meetings, Michael decided to take a break. He went for a long walk, clear of the noise and chaos, trying to center himself. As he walked through a park near his hotel, the cool air helped clear his head, and he realized that he needed to find balance. He couldn't do it all on his own, and he needed to take time to recharge if he was going to continue giving his best. By the time the second Cafe Renaissance location was ready to open, Michael felt a renewed sense of clarity. The road ahead was still going to be difficult, but he was determined to approach it differently. He couldn't afford to burn out, and he needed to delegate more and trust his team. It wasn't just about managing the operations. It was about leading, supporting, and growing with the business. And as he stood in the new restaurant on the eve of its opening, he knew that this was just another step in his journey. The road ahead would be filled with challenges, but Michael was ready to face them head-on. This was only the beginning. The second Cafe Renaissance location had officially opened, and it was everything Michael had hoped for. The grand opening was a success, and the team had handled everything with grace, just as they had in the first location. The restaurant buzzed with energy as guests filled the tables, creating the same vibrant atmosphere that had made the original location so popular. Despite the success, Michael felt like he was on the edge of something. Every day was a tightrope walk. On the one hand, the expansion was gaining momentum. On the other, the pressure was unrelenting. He was managing multiple restaurants now, with more locations on the horizon. While the first few weeks had gone smoothly, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that the harder work was just beginning. Cafe Renaissance wasn't just a single restaurant anymore. It was a brand, a business that required constant attention, innovation, and leadership. One evening, after the closing shift at the second location, Michael found himself sitting alone in the office, staring at his phone. There was a message from Janet that he had missed earlier in the day. It was brief but to the point. "Michael, we need to talk. The team's starting to show signs of burnout. We can't keep pushing like this." Michael sighed, rubbing his face in exhaustion. He had been feeling it too, the pressure, the late nights, the constant rush of things to do. But he had always prided himself on being able to push through, no matter the circumstances. Still, he couldn't ignore the message. Janet was right. The team had been working tirelessly, and it was starting to show. Staff turnover had been higher than expected, and some of the newer team members were struggling to keep up with the fast-paced environment. Michael needed to act, and he needed to act fast. The next morning, Michael met with Janet to discuss the issue. "We've been pushing the team too hard," Janet said, her voice steady but concerned. "We're not a corporate chain yet, and we can't run the business like one. We need to find a way to scale without burning out our people." Michael nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He had been so focused on expanding the brand that he had overlooked the one thing that truly made Cafe Renaissance what it was: the people. "I've been thinking about that too," Michael said. "Maybe it's time we reevaluate the structure of the team. We need to give people more room to grow, to take ownership of their roles. I can't keep doing everything myself. I need to trust my team more." Janet looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "I agree, but it's not just about delegation. We need to focus on their well-being too. Give them time to recharge, not just work non-stop." Michael's mind raced as he considered the changes that needed to be made. How could he build a thriving restaurant empire if his team was constantly running on empty? Over the next few weeks, Michael focused on reshaping the restaurant's internal culture. He implemented new policies to ensure the staff had better work-life balance, offering more time off and clearer boundaries between work and personal life. He encouraged his managers to be more proactive in checking in with their teams, making sure no one was feeling overwhelmed. He also began promoting from within, giving his most trusted employees more responsibility, empowering them to take ownership of their roles in a way that would help ease his own workload. Michael didn't want to be a micromanager. He wanted to lead by example, show the team that he was in it with them, and foster an environment where everyone could grow together. But it wasn't easy. Change never was. Some employees thrived under the new system, while others struggled. It was a delicate balancing act. How to keep the culture of excellence intact while also ensuring no one burned out. One Friday evening, As Michael was overseeing dinner service at the original location, a familiar face appeared at the door. Elon Musk? Michael, Elon greeted him, his smile warm. How's everything going? I've been hearing great things. Michael wiped his hands on his apron, feeling a mix of pride and nerves. It's going well, but there are challenges. We're growing fast, and with that comes pressure. The team's been stretched thin, and I'm working on finding a balance between scaling up and making sure everyone's taken care of. Elon nodded, his gaze thoughtful. I get it. Running a business is never a straight line, but it sounds like you're doing the right thing. Finding that balance between growth and sustainability is key. Michael felt a rush of gratitude. Elon had been a huge part of his journey, but it wasn't just about the business advice. It was about learning how to lead with compassion, how to build something that could endure in the long term. I'm still figuring it out, but I appreciate the advice. We're doing everything we can to make sure we don't lose sight of what makes Café Renaissance special, Michael said, looking around at the busy restaurant. It's the people, both the guests and the staff. Without them, we're nothing. Over the next few months, Michael continued to refine his approach. He learned to delegate more effectively, trust his team, and allow them to take ownership. As the brand grew, so did his leadership style. He wasn't just a manager anymore. He was a leader, someone who inspired and empowered those around him. However, there were still growing pains. One evening, during a particularly busy dinner rush at the second location, the kitchen was overwhelmed. Orders were backed up, the front-of-house staff was getting impatient, and tempers were flaring. Michael could feel the tension rising. As he moved through the kitchen, trying to keep things under control, one of the newer chefs snapped at him. You can't keep running things this way. We're too understaffed for this kind of pressure. Michael's heart sank. He knew the chef was frustrated, but this wasn't the time for conflict. He took a deep breath and forced himself to stay calm. Listen, we're all in this together, Michael said, trying to keep his voice steady. I know it's tough right now, but we'll get through it. We're a team. Let's focus on working together and getting through this rush. The chef, still tense, hesitated for a moment. Then, slowly, they nodded. You're right. I'm sorry. Let's get back to it. As the night wore on and the restaurant finally began to quiet down, Michael found himself reflecting on the evening. The situation had been chaotic, but it had been a reminder of the challenges that came with running a growing business. No matter how prepared you thought you were, there would always be moments of stress and conflict. But the key was how you handled them, and how you made sure your team didn't crumble under the pressure. The next morning, Michael gathered the staff for a debrief. Last night was tough, but we made it through, he began, his tone steady. And I want to thank each of you for your hard work. We're growing fast, and that means we need to stay focused and support one another. We'll keep working on getting better, but we're doing this together. The team responded with a chorus of agreement, and Michael couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. They had made it through the tough times, and they would make it through the next ones, too. Michael's journey was far from over. The restaurant business was full of ups and downs, but each challenge he faced taught him something valuable. He wasn't just learning how to grow a business, he was learning how to lead, how to balance the demands of success with the needs of his team, and how to create something sustainable. As Café Renaissance continued to expand, Michael knew the road ahead would only get more complicated. But he was ready. With his team by his side, and with the lessons he had learned along the way, he was confident they could continue building something extraordinary. As the days passed, Café Renaissance became more than just a brand. It became a symbol of what Michael had envisioned all along. But with the success came an increased sense of responsibility. The constant balancing act between managing the operations, expanding the business, and keeping the team motivated was taking its toll on him. The weight of leadership was more tangible than ever before. It was a Saturday afternoon when Michael received an email that would make him question everything. Michael, I regret to inform you that we're pulling our investment in the Café Renaissance expansion. The rapid growth, combined with the recent staff turnover, has raised concerns with the board. We need to reassess our strategy before moving forward. The email was from one of the venture capitalists who had funded the early stages of the expansion. Michael sat there, stunned. His mind raced, trying to process the words on the screen. The board was losing faith. Was this the beginning of the end? A few hours later, Michael sat in his office, staring out at the city skyline. His thoughts were in turmoil. The recent issues with staff burnout had been a problem, but he hadn't realized it had reached this level. The investors were now questioning his ability to manage the company's growth. The more he thought about it, the more he realized the depth of the problem. Expanding too quickly, without properly addressing internal issues, was dangerous. He knew he had been trying to juggle too much. Running the operations, opening new locations, managing a growing team, and trying to keep up with the competition. There wasn't enough time in the day to do it all. He picked up the phone and dialed Janet. "Michael," Janet answered, her voice full of concern. "What's going on? You sound off." "I just got an email from one of the investors. They're pulling back. They're concerned about the speed of expansion and the burnout issues with the staff," Michael explained, his voice tight with frustration. "They're questioning if I'm the right person to lead this company forward." There was a pause on the other end, and then Janet spoke softly. "Michael, this is a setback, but it's not the end. We've faced challenges before. You've faced challenges before. This is just one more thing we have to overcome." Michael exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of her words. "I don't know if I can keep doing this. I've been pushing so hard, and it feels like everything is starting to fall apart." Later that evening, as Michael sat in his apartment, contemplating his next move, he found himself reflecting on how far he had come. He had started with a small, family-run restaurant, and now he was responsible for an expanding brand, a team of dozens, and the expectations of investors. The pressure was suffocating, but was it too much? The question lingered in his mind as he scrolled through his phone, looking for something to distract him from the weight of the situation. That's when he saw an email from Elon. It was short and direct, but the words seemed to cut through the fog of Michael's thoughts. "Michael, don't let the setbacks define you. I've been in your shoes. When things get tough, you have to step back, recalibrate, and come back even stronger. You've got this." Reading Elon's words brought a sense of clarity. He had made it this far by believing in himself and his team, even when the road was uncertain. Now wasn't the time to give up. He needed to dig deep, take stock of where things stood, and find a way to move forward. The next day, Michael called a meeting with his core leadership team. Janet, the restaurant managers, and a few key staff members gathered around the table. There was an air of uncertainty in the room. Everyone could feel the tension. Michael wasn't sure where to start, but he knew he had to be transparent. "I've received some tough feedback from the investors," Michael began, his voice steady but honest. "They're concerned about the speed of our expansion and the strain it's putting on our team. They're questioning our strategy moving forward. And I have to be honest, I've been struggling too. I've been trying to do it all, and I've made some mistakes." The room was silent. Janet gave him a reassuring nod, and the others remained attentive, waiting for him to continue. "But here's the thing," Michael said, taking a deep breath. "I believe in Cafe Renaissance. I believe in this brand, in all of you, and in what we've built. I've learned a lot from the challenges we've faced so far, and I know that we can turn this around, but I need to ask something of you all. I need your support. We need to work together to reassess our strategy and figure out how we can keep growing, without burning out." Janet spoke up first. "We've all been working incredibly hard, but I think we need to take a step back and make sure we have the right systems in place to support the growth. If we're going to keep expanding, we need more leadership in place. We need managers who can take charge at each location without you having to oversee every single detail." Michael nodded, feeling a sense of relief. "I agree. I've been spreading myself too thin. I need to focus on the big picture, on the vision and the future of the brand. We need to trust our team more and empower them to lead." The conversation shifted from crisis mode to problem solving. The group discussed ways to improve staff retention, reduce burnout, and implement a more sustainable growth strategy. Michael realized that, just as much as he needed to grow as a leader, the business needed to evolve as well. They had reached a turning point, and how they handled this moment would shape the future of Cafe Renaissance. In the days that followed, Michael implemented the changes discussed in the meeting. He began to delegate more tasks to trusted managers and streamline some of the processes that had become bottlenecks. He also introduced a leadership development program to groom the next generation of restaurant managers, empowering them to take on more responsibility. He also made sure to check in with the staff regularly, asking for feedback on how they were doing and what they needed. It became clear that the team was starting to feel the weight of the changes, but there was a renewed sense of hope in the air. The belief that they could weather the storm, and even come out stronger on the other side, began to take root. One evening, as Michael was finishing up a shift at the original Cafe Renaissance location, he received a call from Janet. "Michael," she said, her voice full of excitement, "we did it. The investors are on board. They've agreed to continue funding the expansion, but with a few conditions. They want to see us take a more measured approach moving forward, and they want more structure in place. But they believe in us." Michael felt a wave of relief wash over him. "That's great news, Janet. I'm so relieved. I think this is a turning point for us," Janet said, her voice full of optimism. "We're learning, growing, and adapting. And that's exactly what we need to do." Michael smiled, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. He had faced the storm head-on, and now, it seemed like things were finally starting to stabilize. But he knew this was just the beginning. The road ahead would still have its challenges, but with his team by his side, he felt more prepared than ever to face them. The weeks following the investors' decision to continue funding the expansion brought a new sense of purpose to Michael. The pressure had not fully dissipated, but the road ahead suddenly felt less daunting. With the team's renewed focus and a more structured approach, they had started to regain their footing. There was still a lot to be done, but the momentum was shifting in the right direction. It was a crisp Tuesday morning when Michael arrived at the original Cafe Renaissance location. The energy inside was electric, as always, but there was a sense of calm beneath it. The changes were beginning to take root. The team felt more supported, and Michael could see the difference in their work ethic and enthusiasm. They were no longer just reacting to the daily demands. They were anticipating challenges, proactively solving problems, and working together as a cohesive unit. Janet was at the front of the house, talking with a group of servers who were discussing the new menu items. She caught Michael's eye and waved him over. "Hey, Michael, can you believe how well everything is going?" Janet asked, her voice brimming with excitement. Michael smiled, the weight of the past few months lifting off his shoulders. "I'm feeling good about it. It's like we've turned a corner. We've still got a long way to go, but the team is really coming together. I think the leadership changes are making a huge difference," Janet said, gesturing to the team working around them. "People are stepping up in ways I didn't expect. You've given them the confidence to take ownership, and it's showing." Michael couldn't help but feel proud. The shift in leadership wasn't just about delegating tasks. It was about creating a culture of empowerment. He had always known that the success of Cafe Renaissance wasn't just about him. It was about the people who made it all happen. And now, he was seeing that pay off. As the team worked seamlessly through their day, Michael reflected on how far they had come. It wasn't just about expanding the brand anymore. It was about building something that was sustainable. They were no longer in survival mode. They were in growth mode, and it felt exhilarating. But as much as things were improving, Michael knew the real test was still ahead. They had just launched the new leadership structure, and it was still fragile. The real challenge would be whether they could continue to grow while maintaining their sense of community and passion. Michael had learned that growth was not just about opening new doors. It was about strengthening the foundation that was already in place. 2 weeks later, Michael sat in a meeting with the senior leadership team at Cafe Renaissance's second location. The discussion was centered around how to implement the lessons they had learned from the struggles they'd faced. The new leadership structure was working well, but there were still issues to address. Mainly, how to scale without losing the personal touch that made Cafe Renaissance special. "We've got to make sure the culture we've built at the original location is reflected in every new restaurant we open," Michael said, his voice firm. "We can't let the quality slip just because we're expanding. If we do, we'll lose everything." Janet nodded, already jotting down notes. "Absolutely. We have to maintain the same level of attention to detail and care, even as we bring in more locations. It's not just about the food. It's about the experience we create for our guests and the environment we provide for our team." The group continued to brainstorm, each leader offering their thoughts on how to refine the process and expand while staying true to the heart of Cafe Renaissance. There was no easy solution, but Michael was confident that with the right mindset and the right people, they would continue to thrive. That evening, Michael took a moment to himself. He sat in the back office of the second location, overlooking the dining room through a small window. The restaurant was full, buzzing with the sound of laughter and conversation. It was a beautiful sight. He had built this. All the challenges, all the long nights, all the setbacks, it had been worth it. A part of him still felt like an imposter at times, unsure if he was truly the leader everyone thought he was. But another part of him knew that the growth he had experienced wasn't just about the business, it was about him. He had transformed into someone who could handle the complexities of leadership, someone who could inspire others and keep his vision alive in the face of adversity. But Michael wasn't done yet. Café Renaissance was just getting started. A few weeks later, he and Janet stood in front of a brand new Café Renaissance location. This one was in a bustling neighborhood they had targeted for months. The restaurant was bigger, more modern, and had a slightly different layout than the previous locations, but it retained the signature Café Renaissance charm. An inviting atmosphere, a focus on quality ingredients, and a dedication to exceptional service. "I think we've found the right balance," Michael said, looking over the new space. "We've learned from our past challenges, and we've built a stronger foundation." Janet grinned, clearly pleased with the results. "This is it, Michael. You've really done it." Michael took a deep breath, feeling a mix of pride and anticipation. "This is just the beginning," he said. "We've got more to do. More locations, more people to inspire, more ways to grow." As they moved through the grand opening, Michael couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. The road ahead was still uncertain, but he was no longer afraid of it. He had learned the importance of resilience, the power of teamwork, and the value of trusting his gut. He had learned that the most important thing in business wasn't the profits, the locations, or even the brand. It was the people. And as he looked around at the smiling faces of his team, he knew that no matter how big Café Renaissance became, it would always be a place where people mattered most. The expansion of Café Renaissance had been smoother than Michael could have hoped for. The new location was a hit, and everything seemed to be on track for the future. But even when things were going well, Michael knew that success often came with its own set of challenges. He was about to discover that firsthand. It was a quiet Tuesday morning when Michael got the call. Janet's voice, usually calm and collected, had a hint of urgency in it. "Michael, we've got a problem at the new location," Janet said, her voice tight with concern. "There's been a health inspection, and we've been cited for a few violations. Nothing major, but it's enough to delay our opening schedule by at least a week." Michael's stomach dropped. The restaurant was supposed to be ready for a grand opening dinner with high-profile guests by the end of the week. A delay would mean more than just a temporary setback. It could impact the momentum they had built and damage their reputation. "What kind of violations are we talking about?" Michael asked, trying to stay calm. "Some issues with food storage and a minor discrepancy with fire safety regulations. It's nothing that can't be fixed, but the inspectors are insisting that we address them before they'll sign off." Michael pinched the bridge of his nose, frustration creeping in. He had put so much time and energy into making sure everything was perfect, but it felt like just when they were on the verge of something great, something out of his control was standing in their way. "I'll head over there right now," Michael said, his mind already racing with solutions. "We'll get this sorted out." When Michael arrived at the new location, he was met by the restaurant manager, Sarah, who walked him through the inspection report. The violations were small, but they were enough to cause a ripple in their plans. Sarah explained that the kitchen staff had made a mistake with the food storage temperature, and the fire extinguisher in one of the storage areas was not up to code. "This is going to cost us time and money," Michael said, pacing in the back of the kitchen. "We've got a deadline to meet, and this is going to slow everything down." Sarah looked uneasy but nodded. "I know, but we can fix this quickly. We've already reached out to the vendors for new equipment, and I'll have the kitchen staff redo the food storage. We should be ready to pass the re-inspection in a couple of days." Michael took a deep breath. The feeling of things slipping out of his control was maddening, but he reminded himself that these setbacks were part of the journey. The true test of leadership wasn't how you handled success. It was how you managed failure and adversity. "We'll fix it," Michael said firmly, locking eyes with Sarah. "But we need to work fast and make sure nothing else slips through the cracks. I'll get on the phone with the vendors, and we'll make sure everything's in place for the reinspection. Over the next few days, Michael and his team worked tirelessly to resolve the issues. They coordinated with contractors, worked late into the night to fix the food storage problem, and conducted multiple fire safety checks to ensure compliance. The pressure was mounting, and Michael could see the exhaustion starting to settle in on his team. Late one night, as he was leaving the restaurant after another long day, he received a text from Janet. It read, "The team's doing great, but I'm worried about you. Don't burn yourself out. You've got a lot of people relying on you." Michael paused before responding. He had always prided himself on being the one everyone could rely on, but lately, he was feeling the weight of it all. He was juggling multiple locations, the expectations of investors, and his personal life, which had become an afterthought in recent months. He typed a quick reply, "Thanks, Janet. I know you're right. I'll make sure to take a step back once this is all over." But deep down, Michael wasn't sure if he could afford to take a break. The stakes were too high, and he couldn't let his team down now, especially with so many moving parts. On the morning of the reinspection, Michael stood at the front of the restaurant, waiting nervously for the inspector to arrive. Janet was by his side, trying to keep the mood light. "We've done everything we could," Janet said, her tone reassuring. "Now it's just a matter of waiting." Michael nodded, but didn't feel reassured. Every fiber of his being was focused on the outcome of this inspection. If they passed, the grand opening could go forward as planned. If they failed, it would delay everything and possibly harm their reputation. After what felt like an eternity, the inspector arrived. He walked through the restaurant with a sharp eye, taking note of every small detail. The tension in the air was palpable as the team waited for his feedback. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the inspector nodded. "Everything looks good now. You've made the necessary changes, and I'm happy to sign off." The room erupted in applause, and Michael felt the weight of the past few days lift off his shoulders. The delay had been stressful, but they had made it through. They were back on track for the grand opening. That evening, as Michael sat in his office and looked over the updated schedule, he realized how close they had come to falling off track. This experience had tested him in ways he hadn't anticipated, but it had also reinforced the lessons he had learned over the past year, things like resilience, adaptability, and, most importantly, the importance of trusting his team. He took a moment to check his phone. There was another message from Janet, this time a simple one. "You did it, Michael. We did it." Michael smiled, feeling a sense of pride swell in his chest. Yes, it had been difficult, but it was worth it. This was what leadership was about, being tested and coming out stronger on the other side. But as he looked toward the future, Michael knew that challenges would continue to come. The key would be how he handled them. And this time, he was ready. The grand opening of the new Café Renaissance location was a massive success. The restaurant was packed, the atmosphere was electric, and the reviews poured in. Everything they had worked for had finally come together. Michael couldn't help but feel a deep sense of accomplishment. After the inspection fiasco and all the obstacles they had overcome, this was the payoff he had been waiting for. A few days later, Michael found himself sitting in his office, reviewing the numbers from the opening night. The sales were through the roof, and the buzz around the new location was palpable. But as he sat there, staring at the screen, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He thought about the months of planning, the sleepless nights, and the constant juggling of responsibilities. He had been so focused on the external factors, the grand openings, the investor meetings, the new hires, that he had lost track of something far more important. He had neglected the one thing that had always been the foundation of Café Renaissance, his own well-being. As the adrenaline of the recent success began to fade, Michael felt the toll it had taken on him. His health had been suffering. He hadn't seen his family in weeks, and his social life had all but disappeared. His body was constantly exhausted, and he had become so wrapped up in the business that he'd forgotten what it felt like to simply breathe. Janet had noticed it too. "I don't want to sound dramatic," she had said during their last conversation, "but you've been running on empty for a while now. You're starting to burn out, Michael. You need to take a step back, for your own sake." But Michael had brushed it off, focusing instead on the excitement of their recent success. Now, sitting in his office, the reality of the situation hit him. He couldn't continue down this path forever. Something had to give. That night, as Michael lay in bed, his mind was racing. He thought about his team, the business, the future. But most of all, he thought about himself. His personal life was in shambles, and he couldn't ignore it any longer. He knew that he needed to make a change, but he wasn't sure where to start. His phone buzzed on the nightstand, interrupting his thoughts. It was a text from Elon Musk. "Michael, I know things have been crazy for you lately. Don't let the pressure overwhelm you. You've built something incredible, but don't forget the people who helped you get there. And that includes yourself. Take time to recharge. You can't pour from an empty cup." Elon's words hit home. It was advice that seemed so simple, yet it felt like a lifeline. Michael knew Elon had always been there to offer guidance, but tonight, those words resonated more deeply than ever before. Maybe he had been so focused on external validation, on the next step in his business journey, that he had forgotten the importance of taking care of himself. The next morning, Michael called Janet and asked her to meet him. She arrived at the office, looking curious but concerned. "What's going on, Michael?" Janet asked, her eyes scanning his face for any sign of distress. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, and I've been thinking about everything. This business, my health, my life. I can't keep pushing myself this hard without taking a step back. I need to make some changes," Michael said, his voice quieter than usual. Janet paused for a moment, taking in his words. "You're right, Michael. We've all been running at full speed, but we can't ignore the fact that you're only human. The business is important, but you are too." Michael nodded. "I've realized that I can't keep doing it all myself. I've been trying to handle every aspect of the business, but I need to delegate more and trust my team. I also need to take some time for myself, maybe go on a vacation, spend time with my family." Janet smiled, her expression softening. "That sounds like a good idea. You've earned it, and the team is stronger now. We've got the leadership in place to keep things moving forward. It's time for you to focus on you." A week later, Michael took the first real break he had had in months. He flew out to a remote beach town, leaving his phone behind and immersing himself in the quiet, peaceful environment. He spent the days walking along the shore, reading books, and reconnecting with the parts of himself he had neglected for so long. It was in this solitude that Michael began to find clarity. The pressure, the expectations, the constant push for success, it had all clouded his judgment. But now, away from it all, he could see things with fresh eyes. His business was growing, yes, but the real success was in the people he had surrounded himself with, the team that had rallied behind him and helped him through the hardest times. He had built something great, but now, he needed to ensure that he could continue to lead it without losing himself in the process. When Michael returned to Café Renaissance a week later, he felt like a new man, refreshed, refocused, and ready to take on whatever came next. The first thing he did was gather his leadership team. "I've had some time to think about everything, and I've realized that the only way forward is to work smarter, not harder," Michael said, addressing the room. "We've got an incredible team, and it's time for me to step back a little and let you all take the reins. You've proven yourselves, and I trust you to make decisions without me looking over your shoulder." Janet smiled from across the room. "I think this is the best decision you've made in a long time. It's time for all of us to step up and take on more responsibility." Michael looked around at the team, feeling a deep sense of pride. He realized that the business had outgrown him in a way. It wasn't just about his vision anymore. It was about the collective vision of everyone who had contributed to Café Renaissance's success. He was still the leader, but he didn't have to do it alone. Over the next few months, Café Renaissance continued to thrive. With Michael taking a more hands-off approach, the team stepped up and new leaders emerged within the organization. The business was more efficient, more cohesive, and more successful than ever before. Michael took time to balance his personal life as well. He reconnected with family, spent more time with friends, and began to rediscover the things he loved before the business consumed his every waking hour. He realized that, in the end, success wasn't just measured by the size of the company or the profits it generated. It was about the relationships he built, the lives he touched, and the happiness he could find, both in business and in life. As Michael stood in the original Café Renaissance location one evening, watching the hustle of the restaurant floor, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had come a long way from the man who had been overwhelmed by stress and self-doubt. Now, he was leading with clarity, trusting his team, and, most importantly, trusting himself. The storm had passed, and in its place, there was a calm confidence that came from knowing that the future was in good hands. As the weeks turned into months, Café Renaissance continued to soar. The new leadership team had settled in seamlessly, and the business was thriving. Yet, even in the midst of this success, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was on the horizon. The growth was undeniable, but his mind was constantly racing ahead, searching for the next challenge, the next opportunity. He had learned to delegate. He had learned to trust. But as the company expanded, Michael began to see that there were more complex decisions to be made, decisions that would require him to think not just in the short term, but for the future of Café Renaissance. It was a rainy Thursday morning when Michael sat down with Janet at a quiet corner booth in the original Café Renaissance. They had been discussing potential locations for the next expansion, but today, their conversation took a different turn. "I've been thinking a lot about our future," Michael began, his eyes focused on his coffee cup. "We've built something special here, but I don't want to just open more locations and call it a day. I want to make Café Renaissance a brand that means something, a symbol of innovation, quality, and community." Janet nodded thoughtfully, her fingers tapping the table as she processed his words. "I get it. You don't just want to be a successful restaurant chain. You want to create something that stands the test of time." Michael leaned forward, a sense of determination building within him. "Exactly. I'm thinking bigger than just opening more locations. We could create a Café Renaissance experience that extends beyond the restaurant walls. A place where people feel connected to something meaningful. A place that represents not just great food, but a lifestyle." "Are you talking about something like a cafe culture brand?" Janet asked, intrigued by the idea. "You could extend our presence into things like coffee products, lifestyle merchandise, maybe even content that aligns with the values we stand for." Michael smiled, a spark in his eyes. "Yes, we could create a movement around what Café Renaissance represents: quality, authenticity, and connection. Imagine people all over the country wearing Café Renaissance branded clothing, drinking our coffee at home, and sharing the same values that we've built here. We'd be so much more than just a restaurant." The idea took hold in Michael's mind, and he couldn't let it go. He spent the following weeks refining the concept, drafting ideas for a new line of coffee, branded merchandise, and even a digital platform that could serve as a community hub for the Café Renaissance family. It was ambitious, but Michael had always been driven by the desire to build something lasting, something that would stand out in the world beyond the dining room. But as always, with big ideas came the need for careful planning. This new venture would require significant investment, resources, and a shift in the company's focus. Michael knew it wouldn't be easy, but he also knew that they had the talent and the vision to make it happen. One day, as Michael was poring over proposals for the new brand extension, his phone rang. It was Elon Musk. Michael smiled, glad to hear from his mentor. "Michael, I've been hearing great things about Café Renaissance," Elon said, his voice warm but direct. "I think it's time to start thinking about scaling beyond just locations. You've built a great foundation, and now it's time to take it to the next level." Michael felt a surge of excitement, his heart quickening. "Funny you should say that," he replied, sharing his thoughts about expanding the brand into a lifestyle movement. "I've been working on a concept that could take us beyond the restaurant industry, creating a broader Café Renaissance experience." Elon was silent for a moment, processing the idea. "I think it's a brilliant move, Michael. But remember, this isn't just about products or merchandise. It's about building an ecosystem, a way of life that people can connect to. You need to think about how to create value for your community, not just sell them stuff. If you do that right, the revenue will follow." Michael took note of Elon's words. It was easy to get caught up in the excitement of the idea, but the key to making it successful wasn't just about selling. It was about offering something that people could truly connect with. It wasn't enough to just create a brand. It had to become an extension of people's lives. "I hear you, Elon," Michael said, feeling the weight of his advice. "I'll keep that in mind as we move forward." With a renewed sense of purpose, Michael began presenting the concept to his leadership team. Janet was, as always, on board with the vision. They spent the next several weeks refining the ideas, conducting market research, and seeking out the right partners to help bring their vision to life. Soon, the concept began to take shape. Café Renaissance would launch a new line of high-quality coffee beans, a curated selection of kitchenware, and a collection of branded merchandise, all carefully crafted to align with the values of the company. But more than that, they would create a digital presence that would allow fans of the brand to connect, share, and grow together in a meaningful way. They would build a community, not just a customer base. The first major step came when they launched the Café Renaissance subscription service, which offered a monthly delivery of freshly roasted coffee beans, exclusive merchandise, and access to digital content that showcased the company's values. It was an instant hit. Next, they created a series of videos that highlighted the craftsmanship behind their coffee and the stories of the people who helped make it all possible. They shared behind-the-scenes glimpses of the company's culture, as well as the company's commitment to sustainability and ethical sourcing. The videos quickly gained traction on social media, and Café Renaissance started to gain a loyal following outside of its restaurant walls. The impact was immediate. The brand was no longer just a place to eat, it was a lifestyle. As the months went by, the company grew at an exponential rate. The new ventures took off, and the team worked tirelessly to maintain the quality and authenticity of the brand. Michael was thrilled by the success, but he also knew that it was just the beginning. But the most fulfilling part of the journey wasn't the revenue or the accolades. It was the way the community had embraced Café Renaissance as something more than a restaurant. It had become a part of their daily lives, their rituals, and their identities. One evening, as Michael stood on the balcony of his office, overlooking the city skyline, he reflected on everything that had brought him to this point. He had built a successful restaurant, expanded it into a lifestyle brand, and created a community that was invested in the mission of Café Renaissance. He had learned so much along the way, about leadership, about resilience, about balance. But most of all, he had learned that success wasn't just about what you achieved, it was about what you created for others. And Michael was proud of the space they had built. The future was bright, and for the first time in a long time, Michael felt at peace. As Café Renaissance continued to thrive, Michael faced a new set of challenges. The brand had expanded beyond anything he could have imagined when he first started, and while the success was gratifying, it brought with it an entirely new set of pressures. The demand for their coffee and merchandise had outpaced their ability to supply it. The warehouse was now overwhelmed, the delivery system was struggling to keep up, and production couldn't meet the rising expectations of their loyal customers. Michael could feel the pressure mounting every day. One afternoon, Michael sat at his desk, staring at the spreadsheet in front of him. The numbers were beginning to look concerning. Sales were up, but their supply chain wasn't scaling fast enough to keep pace. On top of that, the online customer service system was starting to get flooded with complaints about delayed shipments and broken merchandise. He knew something needed to change. "We can't let this slip," Michael muttered to himself as he tapped his fingers nervously on the desk. "We've worked too hard to let this falter now." Just then, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Janet, meeting with the team at 3 p.m. to discuss the next steps. "I think we need to address these supply chain issues. Let's talk." Michael quickly responded, "I'll be there. Let's figure this out." The meeting was tense. Michael, Janet, and the leadership team gathered around the conference table, the weight of the situation hanging over them. "We've hit a point where our current supply chain isn't sustainable," Janet began, voicing the concern that had been building in Michael's mind. "Our vendors can't keep up with the volume we need, and we're having trouble finding new partners who can meet our standards." Michael nodded, rubbing his temples. "We can't afford to keep pushing our customers back. This brand is built on quality, and if we can't deliver that consistently, we risk losing everything. We might need to consider bringing production in-house," Sarah, the operations manager, suggested cautiously. "That way, we have more control over the process. But it's a significant investment, and it's going to take time to ramp up." Michael thought for a moment. The idea of taking control of production was both exciting and daunting. It would require capital, resources, and time, something they were running short on. But he couldn't ignore the fact that they were losing customers by the day, and that was not a situation he could let continue. It's not going to be easy, Michael said, but I think you're right. If we want to keep the brand integrity intact, we'll have to take that leap. Let's explore the possibility of bringing production in-house. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Michael and the team scoured the market for production facilities, met with potential manufacturers, and began the daunting process of integrating everything into their own operations. The challenges were plentiful: finding the right equipment, training staff, and ensuring that everything was up to the quality standards they had promised their customers. As they worked through these hurdles, Michael began to realize just how complex the business had become. What started as a simple cafe was now a multifaceted brand that required a level of management and logistics he had never anticipated. It was exhilarating, but also overwhelming. And yet, through it all, Michael remained focused on the bigger picture. This was the next step in the evolution of Café Renaissance, and it was essential to the future of the company. He just needed to ensure that they didn't lose sight of the core values that had made them successful in the first place. One evening, as Michael walked through the bustling cafe, watching customers enjoy their meals and the atmosphere he had worked so hard to create, he paused for a moment. It was hard to believe how far they had come. The restaurant had transformed from a small, humble eatery into a thriving brand that was now a household name. But with that growth came challenges. And right now, they were in the midst of one of the toughest tests yet. A week later, Michael sat down with Janet once again. The production facility was nearly ready to go, but there were still many loose ends to tie up. "We're getting closer," Janet said, reviewing the latest updates. "The new facility will be up and running soon, and we've got most of the logistics figured out. But I think we need to focus more on customer experience. People are frustrated with the delays, and if we don't handle that right, we could lose some of them." Michael sighed, rubbing his eyes. "You're right. It's about keeping the trust of our customers. We've built this brand on relationships, and if we can't maintain that, everything we've done so far could unravel." "We need a clear communication plan," Janet suggested. "We need to be transparent about the challenges we're facing and show our customers that we're working hard to solve them. People will understand if we're honest." Michael agreed. "I'll write a letter to our customers. We need to tell them what's happening and how we're fixing it. They've supported us all this time, and we owe it to them to be open and honest." The next day, Michael sat down at his desk and composed a letter to Café Renaissance's loyal customers. In it, he explained the challenges they were facing with their supply chain, the steps they were taking to resolve the issues, and most importantly, his commitment to maintaining the brand's quality and customer experience. It was a risky move, but Michael knew it was the right one. People valued honesty, and they would appreciate knowing that the company was working hard behind the scenes to address the problem. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Customers appreciated the transparency and expressed their understanding. Sales continued to climb, and as the new production facility came online, the delays began to decrease. But the experience was a humbling reminder for Michael. It wasn't just about scaling quickly, it was about scaling sustainably. He had learned that no matter how big the brand got, the key to success was maintaining the relationships that had gotten him there in the first place. People weren't just buying coffee or merchandise. They were buying into the Café Renaissance experience, and that experience needed to remain authentic no matter how big they grew. As the months went by, the company stabilized, and the new production system proved to be a success. The supply chain was running smoothly, and customer satisfaction was back on track. Michael felt a deep sense of pride in what they had accomplished, but he also knew that the challenges of scaling were far from over. There would always be new obstacles to face, new hurdles to overcome. But as he looked at the thriving brand he had built, he realized that he was ready for whatever came next. Because Café Renaissance wasn't just about a product, it was about a community. And with that community by his side, he knew there was nothing they couldn't achieve together. Just when Michael thought the company had weathered the storm and stabilized, another challenge reared its head, one that he had never anticipated. It wasn't a production issue, a marketing dilemma, or even an expansion challenge. This time, it was a shift in the market itself. The demand for gourmet coffee and high-end experiences had been growing exponentially, but recently, Michael had noticed something unsettling. A wave of new competitors had entered the scene. Smaller, nimble startups that offered unique twists on the cafe experience, often catering to niche markets that Café Renaissance hadn't fully tapped into yet. For the first time since Café Renaissance had started, Michael felt the tremor of uncertainty. These new brands were capitalizing on social media trends, sustainability practices, and hyperlocalization, ideas that had once been part of Café Renaissance's appeal, but now, those same ideas were becoming the standard. It started with a few conversations with Janet. One afternoon, Michael met her at their flagship cafe location for a quick meeting. The place was bustling, as always, but he could sense her usual energy was different. "Something's changed in the air, huh?" Michael began, before taking a sip of his coffee. He was trying to gauge her thoughts, but he already knew what was coming. Janet sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I've been seeing it too. These new cafes popping up, the micro-roasters, the local coffee pop-ups, they're gaining traction fast. Their social media game is strong, and they're offering something a little more local and raw than we are. We're starting to look polished, in a way that's almost becoming a cliché." Michael frowned. "You mean we're too mainstream now?" "Not exactly," Janet replied, "but they've figured out how to engage with a younger demographic. A lot of the new brands focus on telling their story, stories about sustainability, community, ethical sourcing, and they make it feel more personal, less corporate. It's very Instagram-worthy, you know?" Michael rubbed his chin, deep in thought. "But we've always had those values. We've always been focused on sustainability and quality." Janet nodded. "We have, but it's not enough anymore to just say it. We need to find a way to make those values feel more real, more tangible. We're not just selling a product, we're selling an experience. And that experience needs to evolve with the times." Over the next few weeks, Michael found himself reflecting on everything Café Renaissance had become. It was true, Café Renaissance had grown from a local favorite to a regional powerhouse, but somewhere along the way, it had become so polished, so sleek, that it risked losing its original soul. He had to figure out how to evolve without alienating the loyal customers who had supported them from the beginning. He couldn't deny that these new competitors were onto something. They had found a way to be both local and global at the same time. They were connecting to customers on a personal level, making them feel like part of something bigger, without sacrificing the quality or mission of their brand. It was time for Café Renaissance to find its edge again. One evening, as Michael sat in the back office, his phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Elon Musk, his trusted mentor. "Michael, you've got something special with Café Renaissance. But don't rest on your laurels. The market will always change, and you have to keep moving forward or you'll get left behind. Get out there, listen to what people want, and find a way to evolve while staying true to your roots. That's what keeps brands like yours alive." Michael read the message over and over, allowing Elon's words to sink in. It was a wake-up call. Elon was right. The market was changing, and if they didn't stay ahead of the curve, they risked becoming irrelevant. The following morning, Michael called an emergency meeting with his leadership team. As they gathered around the table, Michael laid out his thoughts. "We've been resting on our laurels for too long," he said. "I've been too focused on the operational side of things, and not enough on the experience we're offering our customers. The world is changing fast, and we need to stay ahead of the curve. We need to reimagine what Café Renaissance stands for, but we need to do it while staying true to our values." Sarah, the operations manager, looked concerned. "What exactly are you suggesting? A total rebrand?" Michael shook his head. "Not a rebrand, more like a reinvention. We need to dive deeper into what makes us unique. We have to embrace new trends, but without compromising the core of who we are. We're about quality, sustainability, and connection. But we need to do it in a way that feels more authentic, more raw. We need to move away from feeling like a polished corporate entity and become something that feels more personal, more real." Janet, ever the pragmatic voice, raised an eyebrow. "That's a big shift, Michael. Are we prepared for that?" "We'll have to be," Michael replied firmly. "It's not just about coffee. It's about creating a movement. We've always said we wanted to make a difference. Now it's time to live up to that." Over the next few months, Michael and the leadership team set out to transform Café Renaissance. They took a deep dive into understanding their customers' evolving needs and desires. They started by revisiting their core values and rethinking how to express them in a way that resonated with today's consumers. It wasn't just about making great coffee anymore. It was about building a community, a lifestyle, a movement. They began by introducing a new initiative called Renaissance Roots. This program would focus on locally sourced ingredients, small batch coffee roasting, and a commitment to sustainability at every level of their supply chain. The goal was to bring their products and experiences closer to the communities they served, while still maintaining the high standards that had always set them apart. Additionally, they reworked their cafe spaces to reflect a more authentic, organic feel. Gone were the sleek, modern designs. Instead, they embraced a more rustic, community-oriented aesthetic. Think reclaimed wood tables, exposed brick walls, and plants hanging from the ceiling. It was a physical representation of the company's renewed focus on connection, sustainability, and authenticity. The response was immediate. Customers began to notice the change, and social media buzzed with excitement. Cafe Renaissance was no longer just a polished brand. It was a community that people could truly be a part of. It was real, it was raw, and it was exactly what they had been craving. It wasn't just about coffee anymore. It was about a shared experience, a collective identity, and Michael realized, in that moment, that this shift was exactly what they needed to stay relevant in an ever-evolving market. As Cafe Renaissance continued to evolve, Michael felt a renewed sense of purpose. The challenge of staying ahead of the curve had reignited his passion for the brand. He knew that as long as he continued to listen, adapt, and stay true to the company's roots, the future of Cafe Renaissance was bright. Because at the end of the day, success wasn't just about being the biggest or the best. It was about being authentic. And that was something no one could ever copy. With Cafe Renaissance now fully reimagined, Michael felt a sense of accomplishment. The cafe's new look and ethos had breathed new life into the brand. Customer engagement was through the roof, and the feedback they were getting was overwhelmingly positive. But despite the success, he knew there was one final test to pass. The company had grown exponentially, and while Michael had successfully navigated the changes in the market and made adjustments to the business model, he realized that this new phase was just as fragile as it was exciting. The next step wasn't just about keeping up with trends, it was about creating something lasting, something that could stand the test of time. As he sat in his office one evening, reflecting on the journey, he received a call from Janet. The tone in her voice was serious. "Michael, we've got a problem," she said, her words carrying a sense of urgency. "I think we've hit another bottleneck." Michael's heart sank. He had hoped that after all the adjustments, the business was finally on solid ground. But the reality was, the challenges of growth never stopped. "What's going on?" he asked, pushing his worries aside. "It's the expansion plans," Janet continued. "We've been looking at more locations to open in new cities, but the demand we're seeing for our current operations is actually starting to strain our resources. We're at a tipping point. If we push forward with new openings, we risk compromising the experience our customers expect. But if we don't, we miss out on growth opportunities that could make the brand even bigger." Michael leaned back in his chair, staring at the skyline outside the window. This was the moment he had been dreading, the point where the pressure to grow clashed with the need to maintain quality. He understood better than anyone that once a brand expanded beyond its roots, it was easy to lose touch with the very essence that made it special. The next few days were filled with intense meetings. Michael gathered his senior leadership team to discuss the problem in detail. There were heated discussions, back-and-forth debates about the future of the company, and moments when Michael felt the weight of the decision on his shoulders. "I think we need to take a step back," Michael finally said, after listening to various opinions. "We've been so focused on growth that we've neglected what makes us who we are. I don't want to spread us too thin. Our current locations are the heart of this brand, and we need to make sure we can handle the demand here before we jump into anything new." Janet nodded in agreement. "You're right. The last thing we want is to compromise the customer experience. We've worked too hard to build this brand on trust, authenticity, and quality." "But what about the potential growth?" asked Sarah, the operations manager. "If we don't move forward, we risk losing momentum. Other brands are growing at a rapid pace, and if we don't act now, we could fall behind." Michael sighed. This was the crux of the challenge. The decision wasn't just about taking the safer route. It was about finding balance. We'll scale, but we'll do it smartly. I want to solidify our current operations, strengthen our foundation, and build a sustainable growth strategy. No more rushing into anything. We're not in a race. We're in this for the long haul. The decision to slow down and focus on internal improvements wasn't an easy one, but it was the right choice. Michael and his team shifted their focus to improving their current infrastructure. They upgraded the technology behind their inventory and order management systems, making the entire operation more efficient. They expanded their training programs for baristas and staff to ensure that the customer experience was consistent, no matter where customers walked into a Café Renaissance location. Additionally, Michael made the bold decision to invest in innovation. Instead of rushing into more openings, he wanted to explore ways to enhance the cafe experience through technology. They experimented with augmented reality in-store experiences, personalized loyalty programs, and even virtual coffee tasting sessions. The goal wasn't just to sell coffee. It was to create an experience that people couldn't find anywhere else. As weeks passed, the decision to slow down proved to be the right one. The new initiatives were paying off, and the customer satisfaction levels soared. People appreciated the effort they were putting into improving their experience, and the cafes became more than just places to grab a coffee. They became places to connect, learn, and share in something bigger. One afternoon, Michael received a call that would change everything once again. It was from Elon Musk. The two had stayed in touch since Michael had started Café Renaissance, and their conversations had often revolved around business strategy, innovation, and what it meant to build a lasting brand. "Michael, I've been following your progress, and I have to say, I'm impressed," Elon said, his tone as confident as ever. "But I think there's a big opportunity for Café Renaissance, something that could elevate the brand even further. You've built a solid foundation, and now it's time to think bigger." Michael was intrigued. "What do you have in mind?" Elon's voice took on a more thoughtful tone. "I've been thinking a lot about the future of food and beverage, especially in terms of sustainability and technology. There's a huge gap in the market for companies that can merge those two elements in a way that feels truly innovative. You're already on the right path, but what if you could take it to the next level?" Michael's mind raced as he processed Elon's words. It wasn't just about opening new locations or expanding. They were talking about something much more groundbreaking. "Are you suggesting something like a high-tech, sustainable cafe experience?" Michael asked, his curiosity piqued. "Exactly," Elon replied. "Think about integrating renewable energy, cutting-edge food technologies, and hyperlocal supply chains that connect customers directly with the producers. Create an ecosystem of sustainability, efficiency, and innovation that aligns with your values, but takes them to the next frontier." Michael felt a spark of excitement. This was the future. It wasn't just about staying competitive in the market. It was about redefining the entire cafe experience for a new generation. Over the next few months, Michael threw himself into the concept. With Elon's encouragement, Café Renaissance began to explore new technologies and sustainable practices that could revolutionize their business. They started experimenting with zero-waste processes, offering plant-based menu items, and incorporating renewable energy into their stores. The idea was to create a truly innovative cafe experience that set them apart from the competition, not just in the coffee industry, but in the entire food and beverage market. As Café Renaissance continued to innovate, Michael realized that the final test wasn't just about overcoming obstacles. It was about staying true to their mission while continuously evolving to meet the needs of a changing world. And with that, Michael knew that Café Renaissance wasn't just a brand. It was a movement. And it was just getting started. As the months went by, Café Renaissance began to evolve in ways Michael hadn't fully anticipated when he first envisioned its future. The decisions they made to scale smarter, combined with the innovations they were bringing into their cafes, were starting to pay off. But Michael knew that this new phase, this bold vision of a sustainable, tech-forward cafe, was only the beginning. They were on the precipice of something even bigger, and the stakes had never been higher. It was a brisk morning when Michael arrived at their newest flagship store, located in a trendy, bustling area of downtown. This wasn't just any new cafe. This location was the flagship of their new direction. It was designed with the latest in sustainable architecture, equipped with solar panels, energy-efficient lighting, and a hyperlocal supply chain that sourced ingredients from farms within a 50-mile radius. This cafe was also the first to integrate augmented reality technology, allowing customers to visualize their coffee's journey from bean to cup. The experience wasn't just about the coffee. It was about engaging the customer in a deeper connection with everything that went into it. Michael walked through the front doors, greeted by the sounds of soft jazz music and the hum of excited conversations. The decor was sleek yet warm, with reclaimed wood furniture, vertical gardens, and walls lined with innovative digital displays showing the stories of the farmers and producers they partnered with. It was everything he had envisioned, a perfect blend of technology, sustainability, and community. He spotted Janet across the room, standing near a table where a group of customers was discussing their experience. She waved him over, her face beaming with pride. "Michael, you've got to see this," she said, as they walked over to the table. The customers were eagerly chatting about the new interactive features on the cafe's digital menu, where they could see detailed information about every single ingredient they were consuming. From the ethical sourcing of the coffee beans to the environmental impact of the packaging, everything was transparent. The customers were engaged, curious, and genuinely excited about the changes. "This is amazing," Michael said, looking at Janet. "I think we've done it." She nodded. "This is what I've been hoping for. We're not just selling coffee. We're selling an experience. An experience that feels connected to the values we've been working to create. People are seeing it. They're feeling it." Michael looked around at the space, feeling a rush of pride. This wasn't just the next step for Cafe Renaissance. It was a new era for the brand. They had created something that stood for more than just quality coffee. It was a movement that celebrated sustainability, transparency, and the power of connection. Later that day, Michael sat down with his team for a debrief. They'd successfully launched the new flagship cafe, and it was time to assess the response, refine their strategy, and plan for the future. The energy in the room was palpable. Everyone was excited about the changes, but they knew there was still a long road ahead. "We've taken a huge step," Michael began, looking around at the room, "but now we need to think about scaling this concept without losing the soul of what we've built. We've learned a lot, but this is just the beginning. We've got to stay agile, keep listening to our customers, and continue pushing boundaries." Sarah, the operations manager, spoke up. "I think we're at a tipping point. We can keep expanding, but it's not just about opening more locations. We need to ensure we maintain that personal connection with every customer, whether it's through technology or the way we source our products. It's about staying true to our mission." Michael nodded. "Exactly. We're building a brand that's bigger than coffee. This is about creating something that lasts, something that can adapt to change but stays grounded in what makes us special." As the meeting progressed, Michael couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought Cafe Renaissance to this point. The company had started with a simple mission to offer great coffee and build meaningful connections. And through all the challenges, setbacks, and unexpected twists, they had managed to evolve into something far more powerful, a movement that was shifting the very landscape of the cafe industry. He thought back to those early days when he was a waiter at a small cafe, mocking a customer's order without knowing that the man was, in fact, Elon Musk. That moment, one of embarrassment and arrogance, had sparked a series of events that eventually led him to where he was today. And now, as he stood on the brink of something even bigger, Michael realized that success wasn't just about building a great business. It was about learning from the past, embracing the present, and always pushing forward with a vision that could make a real impact. The following week, Michael made a trip to one of Cafe Renaissance's first locations, the cafe that had started it all. Walking through the familiar doors, he was greeted with the warm smells of fresh coffee and the sounds of conversations. This was the heart of the brand, where it all began. As he stood in the middle of the cafe, he felt a deep sense of gratitude. It had taken everything he had, his passion, his patience, and his willingness to fail, to get to this point. He knew that, moving forward, Cafe Renaissance would continue to evolve. There would be more challenges, more tests, and more opportunities to grow. But what was certain was that the company had found its true north. The key to their success wasn't just in their coffee or their technology. It was in the values they held dear: authenticity, community, sustainability, and the unwavering commitment to offering something more than just a product. That evening, as Michael sat down to reflect on everything they had accomplished, he sent out a message to the entire Cafe Renaissance team. We've come a long way. This is our moment to define the future, not just for ourselves, but for the entire industry. Let's stay true to who we are, while embracing the opportunities of tomorrow. The best is yet to come. And with that, Michael knew that Cafe Renaissance had entered a new chapter, one that would continue to redefine what it meant to be a cafe in a world that was changing faster than ever before. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?